Hello, true crime enthusiasts. Today, we will investigate another intriguing case, the case of Michael Wayne Jones. In 2019, the Jones family lived in a house next to Highway 27 in Summerfield, Florida, which is located in Marion County. The family included Father Michael, Mother Cassie, and their 4 children, Cameron, Preston, Mercalli, and Ayanna, who were between 1 and 10 years old. Cameron and Preston are Cassie's children from a previous relationship, while Mercalli and Ayanna are Michael's biological children. Michael was born on May 1, 1981 and grew up in Vermont. He had a difficult childhood marked by a poor upbringing and abuse from his father. Although his father was eventually imprisoned, his mother began a new relationship with a man who was just as abusive. When he grew up, Michael joined the United States Marine Corps as a medic. During this time, he met his first wife and became a family man, having 3 children with her. After several years of working, Michael's wife helped him get a job at a local veterinary clinic. It was there that he discovered his passion for managing a veterinary practice. During this time, he met Cassie, who had a very different background. Cassie was born on December 23, 1986, into a loving family with parents named Nikki and David, who provided her with a good upbringing. After graduating from high school, she moved to Florida in 2009. Cassie began her career in dog grooming, starting as a groomer and later becoming a veterinary technician. Friends described her as an amazing, kind, and caring person who would readily help others. Cassie and Michael first met at the veterinary clinic, which led to a significant change in their lives. Michael had a troubled past. In 2015, he was arrested for burglary after stealing money, computer equipment, and a firearm from the veterinary clinic where he worked alongside Cassie. Despite this, Cassie forgave him and supported him during this challenging period, even when he fled to New Mexico to escape arrest. Their professional relationship developed into a friendship and eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. This prompted both of them to leave their previous partners and start a new family together. Michael became a stepfather to Cassie's 2 children, while leaving his own children with his ex-wife. Michael and Cassie welcomed their own children in December 2016 and August 2018. After marrying on Halloween in 2017, the family moved into a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom trailer in Summerfield, Florida. Although the space was limited for their family of 6, they were happy together and found the rent affordable. Cassie was a dedicated mother who prioritized her children's growth and happiness. To capture joyful moments, she created a YouTube channel to share memorable photos and videos of her children as they grew. Many of these videos showed Michael playing with his daughters, having fun with Cassie, and enjoying weekends together. He appeared calm and generally content with his life. In those moments, Cassie's laughter rang out, suggesting that their life seemed carefree and joyful. On July 10, 2019, the seemingly perfect life of Cassie began to unravel. Her friends noticed something was wrong when she stopped responding to their calls and went silent. When she eventually sent messages on social media, her friends became concerned because the messages didn't match her usual tone. The first person Cassie cut off contact with was her ex-husband, Richard Bowers, who is also the father of her sons, Preston and Cameron. On July 27, when Richard went to pick up his boys for a scheduled visit, he noticed Cassie wasn't home. When he asked Michael, who was at the house, about her, he was told she was out of town. Since Richard and Cassie had previously agreed that she wanted distance, he left with their children without any concerns. On August 1, Cassie's mother, Nikki, received a strange message from an unknown number, asking if she could care for Cassie's daughters, Mercalli and Ayanna, for a couple of weeks. Nikki agreed, but she never saw her daughter again. When Michael dropped off the children at Nikki's house, it felt unusual to her that he was the only one delivering them. especially since she hadn't heard from Casey in over 3 weeks. At this time, Michael stayed home and cared for his first 2 children with his previous wife, Sarah. On August 11, the children returned home with Sarah, while Cameron and Preston remained with Michael. Weeks went by without anyone seeing or hearing from Casey, and Michael took care of all the household chores. The situation became more concerning when it was noticed that Preston and Cameron were also missing. During this time, Michael listed twin mattresses for sale, and buyers from a nearby area expressed interest. On August 17, the buyers arrived at Michael's residence to pick up the mattresses, but the encounter was not normal. The mattresses smelled of death and Michael acted strangely, leading to a failed sale. On August 22, Richard, the biological father of Preston and Cameron, congratulated his son on his birthday, but received no response. A few days later, Casey's other children, Mercalli and Ayana, also stopped communicating. Amid these unsettling incidents, the Michael family received an eviction notice, requiring them to vacate their rental property within 2 weeks. Soon after, Hurricane Dorian made landfall in Florida and surrounding areas. The storm was so strong that it was classified as a Category 5 hurricane, and is considered the strongest hurricane to have ever made landfall in the northwestern Bahamas in recorded history. A state of emergency was declared across Florida, prompting many to seek shelter or evacuate. Michael was one of those who left the area, heading north to stay with his ex-wife, Sarah, and their children. Although Michael stayed for 10 days, Sarah never saw him contact Casey or the children. While she didn't approve of this, she was aware that Michael and Casey were experiencing problems, so she didn't intervene. After the hurricane passed and the Michael family remained away from home, neighbors reported a terrible smell emanating from their house. The homeowner was notified and knew that Michael's family had supposedly moved out. However, when he looked out the window, he saw that the house was still full of furniture and personal belongings. It was scary, and the air around the house was filled with a strong stench, like something was dead and decomposing. Initially, Casey's family and friends suspected that Michael was trying to go into hiding for legal reasons, causing the family to feel the need to go into hiding for protection. Therefore, they did not report her disappearance to the police. However, on September 14, 2014, her mother, Nikki, decided to contact the Marion County Sheriff's Office. It had been 66 days since anyone had heard from Casey, 34 days since Cameron and Preston were last seen, and 17 days since Mercalli and Ayana were last heard from. Understandably, the police were very worried and promptly began an investigation. When the police arrived at the Michael family's home around midnight, local residents informed them that no one had seen the family for a long time. They also reported a foul odor coming from the house. The police quickly identified the smell as resembling that of a decomposing body, either human or animal. Additionally, the house appeared empty but very clean, as if it had been recently tidied up. Some floorboards looked brand new, but one board had noticeable red stains. This evidence prompted the authorities to launch an investigation in search of the Michael family, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The case took a dramatic turn when, on that same day, Brandley County, Georgia, police received a disturbing report from Summerfield, located 170 miles north of the Michael family's home. Michael had crashed the family car into a concrete sewer tunnel. Although he escaped uninjured, his car was damaged beyond repair. When the police arrived, they detected a strong, repulsive odor and asked Michael about it. He reluctantly confessed to the situation. Upon searching the car, the police discovered the decomposing body of his wife, Casey. Additionally, Michael indicated where he had buried the bodies of his children. Michael was quickly arrested, and after he revealed to authorities the location of his children's burial in the woods near Highway 301 in Charlton County, a search was initiated. investigators discovered a patch of freshly disturbed soil, and to their horror, they uncovered the bodies of Cameron, Preston, Mercalli, and Ayanna. The news shocked the relatives and friends of the Casay family. Richard lost 2 sons and his ex-wife due to her relationship with Michael, while Nikki had to endure the heartbreaking task of burying her daughter and 4 grandchildren. Michael's actions had a lasting impact on the mental health of many people. One of those affected was Michael's ex-wife, Sarah. Her children had stayed at Michael's house several times after he killed Casay and were under the watch of their father, the killer. Additionally, Michael sought refuge from a hurricane at Sarah's home for several days, meaning her children were living close to him during that time. Given the brutality of Michael's actions, it is alarming to consider that he might have harmed Sarah and their other children. Fortunately, he did not, which meant that Sarah and her children were incredibly lucky. After his arrest, Michael cooperated during interrogations. He calmly answered questions without trying to mislead the police and even expressed gratitude for being caught, admitting that he felt he couldn't do anything right. He explained that his actions stemmed from a heated argument with Casay after she accused him of having an affair. Michael described how Casay lost control when she confronted him with a baseball bat and struck him. In a fit of rage, he took the bat from her and hit her several times on the head, continuing until he believed she was dead. He then placed her body in a plastic bag and hid it in a closet, cleaning up any visible blood. During this time, their 4 children were asleep in the house. Following Casay's death, Michael began fabricating stories to cover up what he had done. For weeks, he used Casay's phone to send messages to friends and family, pretending she was still alive. On August 10, 31 days after killing Casay, he decided to murder her 2 sons. He strangled Cameron and then, the following night, used zip ties to strangle Preston. As time went on, the hot and humid weather caused a serious issue. The bodies began to decompose. To mask the smell, Michael tried using cat litter, but it was ineffective. On August 23, after the deaths of his wife and 2 stepchildren, he received an eviction notice, which increased his anxiety. Unable to keep the bodies in the house any longer, he felt confused. On August 25, he took his 2 daughters to the local police station. Sitting with them on a park bench across the street, he tried to figure out how to turn himself in. However, his determination turned to discouragement, and when he got home, he revealed his sadistic side. That night, he drowned both of his daughters, Mercalli and Ayanna, in the bathtub. 2 days later, during a storm, he went to Jacksonville to visit his ex-wife Sarah, without revealing that there were 5 bodies in the trunk of his car. The bodies remained there for 16 days until he finally buried his children. At the time of their deaths, Casay was 32 years old, Cameron was 9, Preston was 4, Mercalli was 2, and Ayanna was just 11 months old. Michael Wayne Jones's trial began on December 8, 2022, and it seems unlikely that he will be released anytime soon. Because the murder of Casay was not premeditated, Michael will face charges of second-degree murder for her death. However, he will be charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of his children. Since he has already confessed to these crimes, he is likely to receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole. It's important to note that Florida still has the death penalty, and the autopsy reports presented in court revealed some tragic details. Cameron had a broken lower jaw at the time of his death, and a plastic zipper was found around Preston's neck. The remains of Mercalli and Ayanna were discovered in a small plastic bag, which also contained a bottle with a pacifier labeled with Ayanna's name, and a small pair of baby sandals. Casay's body was wrapped in a rug and a black and white shower curtain, and her skull showed damage consistent with trauma from a heavy blunt object, indicating she was likely struck rather than injured accidentally. During the trial, The defense argued that Michael should not face severe consequences for several reasons. First, they emphasized his troubled relationship with Casey, portraying her as a domineering woman. Second, they noted that Michael had used various banned substances during the incidents. Lastly, they shared his mental health history, which was rooted in a difficult childhood marked by physical abuse from his father and stepfather. Michael displayed unusual behaviors, such as hitting his head against walls and floors to quiet the voices in his head. It's important to mention that Casey was not entirely innocent in their relationship. Her sister described her as stubborn, aggressive, and at times cruel. Michael stated that he was frequently bullied by Casey, which added to his stress. He also claimed that the actions he took against the children were meant to keep them together with their mother, as he believed they should not be separated. The doctor and clinical psychologist found evidence that Michael came from a dysfunctional family, marked by mental and physical abuse. Despite this, the prosecution showed no mercy. However, all 5 murders occurred within 49 days, indicating that Michael had ample time to regain control of his emotions. Instead, he acted with cold calculation throughout the entire incident. Michael lied many times, such as using Casey's phone to fool many people, including Sarah, and even asking her to give a false alibi. During the trial, his ex-wife Sarah said she wanted them to hang him and end it all because she thought he didn't deserve to live another day. In Florida, Michael Wayne Jones has been convicted of first-degree murder, and if the jury agrees, he could face the death penalty. The final decision rests with Judge Circuit Anthony Taddy, who has not yet scheduled a sentencing date. However, given the circumstances, the judge is expected to render a fair judgment, whether that means sentencing Michael to death or not. His actions place him among criminals deserving of the harshest punishment. Killing your wife is horrific and unforgivable, but taking the lives of 4 innocent children is so appalling that it is almost unimaginable. During Michael's trial, Casey's sister shared the deep pain she feels over the loss of her younger sister and nephews. She eventually had to leave her job because seeing the children's clothes in the store brought her to tears. Following a nervous breakdown, she was unable to get out of bed for 6 months. The thought that her nephews and niece will never graduate, marry, or have children of their own is a constant source of torment for her, often feeling overwhelming. She believes Michael deserves the verdict the jury reached, and she hopes the judge will uphold it. On Friday, April 28, 2023, at a hearing at the Marion County Judicial Center in Ocala, Judge Anthony Taddy sentenced Michael Wayne Jones to death for the murders of 4 children. He was also credited with life in prison for the death of his wife, and was given credit for 1,322 days already served while awaiting the resolution of these cases. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Miles. Sandra was born on May 26, 1949, in the small, cozy town of Harn, Kansas, USA. She had a close relationship with her sister. They attended the same school, walked together, and spent time with their family. After graduating from high school, Sandra focused on starting a family. She was in a serious relationship with her boyfriend, and they decided to get married. They welcomed a son named Chad. Unfortunately, the marriage did not work out. Sandra quickly realized that her husband was not the right match for her. After the divorce, Sandra found another partner, but that relationship also ended in disappointment, leading her to break up with him as well. In 1976, Sandra, a single mother, got a job at a factory that made pumps and pistons for industrial machinery. This job required her family to relocate to a larger city, Hutchinson. In her new position, Sandra proved herself and gained the respect of management through her hard work and responsibility. She performed her tasks exceptionally well. It was during this time that she met her third husband, Jerry Miles. They were instantly attracted to each other, and their friendship quickly blossomed into romance, leading to their decision to marry. Their marriage happened rapidly, but it was evident that Jerry and Sandra truly loved each other and were eager to get married. A year later, Sandra was expecting a baby with her new husband. In September of that year, they welcomed their daughter, Tracy, who brought immense joy to her parents, especially Sandra, who had always dreamed of having a large family. During this time, their marriage appeared to be perfect. The couple had a strong bond and prioritized their family above all else. Jerry's children regularly communicated with him and participated in family events. He particularly enjoyed spending time with Tracy at the nearby lake. To outsiders, their marriage appeared perfect. However, only close friends and family knew of the underlying issue. After 7 years of marriage, Sandra could no longer endure her husband's alcoholism. This revelation shocked many, as she had previously concealed the problem. Sandra ultimately chose to end her marriage to her third husband, Jerry, and raise their children by herself. She thought Jerry was a kind man when he was sober, but he had difficulty managing his drinking. When he drank, he became a completely different person. At first, he was able to control his drinking, but over time, his alcoholism became more and more evident. His relapses became more frequent, placing a heavy burden on Sandra. She worked every day at the factory to support the family and eventually became exhausted from the thing. Sandra always saw Jerry as a wonderful husband and father. Their relationship ended because he struggled with alcohol addiction. Even so, she continued to support their children while maintaining her job. This was a challenging time for her, but she was determined not to give up and managed to handle the difficulties well. Jerry offered some help, but when he succumbed to alcohol again, Sandra had to face all the challenges alone. Despite this, she stayed confident in her abilities and was driven to ensure her children had a bright future and everything they needed for a fulfilling life. It was certainly challenging, but Sandra Miles was not one to give up easily. She remained a conscientious mother, spending all her free time with her children. Despite facing difficulties, she handled them with grace, which brought her closer to her daughter Tracy during this time. Her son had grown up, moved out, and started his own life, but Tracy continues to support her mother because she realizes that Sandra's efforts are mainly to benefit her. In the spring of 1997, Sandra's relationship with Tracy, her 16-year-old daughter, began to deteriorate. Tracy has started dating her first boyfriend and is going through the rebellious phase that is common in adolescence. Sandra tried to improve their relationship. She thought her daughter's problems were only temporary. At the same time, Sandra was mindful of her own past failed marriages and felt the need to caution Tracy about the mistakes she made in her youth. Tracy's affection for her mother faded quickly, leading to a strained relationship between them. To win her daughter's love, Sandra bought Tracy a Black Moon car, which Tracy had longed for. This gift excited Tracy. She adored her car and made a point to arrive first at school every day so everyone would notice it. It seemed like Tracy had a bright future ahead, and she represented hope for Sandra. Sandra was determined to do whatever it took to help her daughter succeed. However, fate can be cruel. On March 20th, Sandra's son Chad and his girlfriend Mindy visited her with exciting news. Mindy was pregnant. Sandra was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother and eagerly anticipated the birth of her grandson. Unfortunately, Sandra would not live to see that moment. While Sandra's sister, Pat Douglas Butler, was having breakfast with her husband, she received an urgent call from Sandra's workplace. Sandra's employer reported that Sandra had been absent for 5 days. Concerned for her well-being, the boss tried to contact her but was unable to reach her. Pat also hadn't heard from her during this time, as they didn't typically call each other every day. Worried, Pat and her husband decided to visit Sandra's house to check if she was okay or if she needed help. When Pat and her husband arrived, they found the door locked and the house appeared deserted. This was strange because Sandra lived there with her daughter, Tracy, who was usually very active and should have been home at that time. Then, Pat and her husband went to the school to look for Tracy. The teachers were confused as Tracy had also been absent for several days. The class teacher, Noni, tried to call the family, but no one answered. Alarmed by the situation, Pat decided to call the police to report the disappearance of both Sandra and Tracy. The officers took Pat's statement and assessed the situation. When they arrived, Pat was waiting for them and handed over a spare key to the front door that she had kept. Law enforcement officers entered the house and immediately detected a strong, unpleasant smell of decomposition, unmistakable in nature. The experienced patrol officers recognized the importance of preserving the crime scene to protect the evidence, so they called for backup. When additional police officers arrived, they discovered the decomposed body of a woman lying on her bed, covered with a blanket. Upon removing the blanket, they found a power cord from a household appliance wrapped around her neck, indicating she likely died from strangulation. Additionally, there were multiple injuries visible on her face and head. Due to the severe level of decomposition, the victim's identity could not be immediately determined. It was unclear how many blows she had suffered or what exactly was hit with, but it was clear that her death was not natural, it was a murder. A forensic medical examination was needed to understand the details surrounding her death. However, dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sandra Miles. Besides, they could not find Tracy in the house, indicating that she was missing. At first, detectives thought Tracy might also be a victim of the same attacker. They searched the house thoroughly, but found no evidence suggesting she had been harmed like her mother. It was possible that Tracy had been kidnapped, placing her in great danger and requiring immediate action. She was added to the missing persons list, and the search for her began. It was unclear who would wish harm on Sandra, a woman who devoted her life to creating a future for her children. When Detective Hutchinson began investigating the case, they considered every possibility, including neighbors and her ex-husband. The aim was to uncover who had a motive for the murder of 48-year-old Sandra Miles and the disappearance of Tracy. Sandra's family, sister, son, and ex-husband were quickly informed of the tragic news. All were in shock. Sandra seemed to have no enemies and was known as a kind and gentle person who worked hard to overcome life's difficulty and support her daughter. It was hard to believe anyone could be so cruel to someone defenseless. Tracy's brother, Chad, made an appeal through the newspaper, asking locals to help find Tracy, his only surviving family member who had been taken from him. Forensic experts have revealed harrowing details of Sandra's last moments. Sandra had been knocked to the ground by repeated blows to her head with a blunt object. While she was incapacitated, a power cord was used to strangle her. The presence of large bruises and internal bleeding indicated she endured a prolonged and violent assault. The medical examiner believed there were likely at least 2 attackers. Investigators suggested that the incident was a robbery gone wrong, possibly triggered when Sandra confronted the intruders as they attempted to steal from her home. Sandra might have seen them, then a fight broke out, and they murdered her because they were afraid she would report to the police. However, after inspecting the crime scene, detectives found this scenario unlikely. There were no signs of a break-in, and the house lost nothing, except Tracy's favorite car. It didn't make sense to commit murder for the sake of theft. The brutality of Sandra's injuries was notable. An ordinary robber wouldn't have wasted time with strangulation, they would have shot her to avoid confrontation. The severe damage to her upper body indicated that the injuries were not a result of panic from being caught, but rather a deliberate attack meant to kill. This level of cruelty suggested a culmination of a long-standing feud. Another possibility considered was that of a maniacal attacker, but generally, such individuals act alone. This crime, however, was clearly carried out by multiple people given the severity of the injuries. Now, the killers had taken Tracy captive, making it urgent to locate the criminals. The detectives believed that Sandra had willingly let her attackers into the house, as there were no signs of forced entry. Therefore, they recognized the need to continue the investigation. The police contacted all of Sandra's relatives, friends, neighbors, and co-workers as part of their investigation. The police focused particularly on her ex-husbands, as they might have motives rooted in resentment. Sandra's third husband, Jerry, who struggled with alcoholism, drew significant attention. He may have been unhappy after the divorce, and the detective speculated that he could have confronted Sandra while intoxicated, possibly leading to her death. However, the detectives to find that he had an alibi, so he was removed from the list of suspects. Police interviewed all of Sandra's acquaintances to identify suspects in the violent massacre and possibly Tracy's kidnapping. Sandra's sister, Pat, informed detectives that she last saw Sandra alive 5 days earlier. On that day, she received a work call around the same time Tracy visited the school where she studied, making it a key date in the investigation. Efforts to gather information from friends and acquaintances were unproductive. So detectives turned to the neighbors. They discovered that the neighborhood was peaceful and close-knit, where everyone was familiar with one another. The next day, news of the incident at Sandra's house spread quickly. A crowd gathered in the yard and driveway, prompting the police to restrict access to the area. Many neighbors stopped by out of curiosity, anxious to learn what had happened. There was a growing concern in everyone, as they realized a dangerous killer, and possibly a kidnapper, was still at large, especially since there had been no word from Tracy. Fortunately, some witnesses in the crowd provided valuable information to the detectives. A neighbor who lived directly across the street reported seeing Tracy about 5 days earlier, on March 25th. He had noticed her with 2 young men. They all got into one of the guy's cars and drove away, and he never saw them again. This account raised questions about the nature of Tracy's disappearance, as it didn't fit the typical scenario of a schoolgirl being kidnapped. The friends, identified as Mark and Jay, lived nearby, so the detectives decided to interview them at their homes. Mark quickly left as several police officers spotted a red car in the distance. When Mark noticed the police approaching, he sped away and vanished at high speed. This behavior seemed suspicious, so one of the detectives alerted the patrol nearby about his direction. Mark wouldn't have fled so rapidly if he weren't trying to hide something from the police. Luckily, it didn't take long for them to catch up. Mark was eventually stopped just a few kilometers from his home. Mark was driving his car with a friend who was anxious about the recent tragedy at Sandra's house. The 2 young men attempted to convince the police that their fear was the only reason for their unusual behavior, but seasoned detectives sensed they were hiding something. Consequently, both were taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, the young men insisted they were merely frightened by the news of the incident at the Miles residence. Their stories closely matched, but the police found no solid evidence against them, so they were released. However, they became important witnesses because the police were aware that Tracy had recently been in a relationship with a young man named Jeremy Bell. They also knew that Sandra disapproved of him, believing he would have a negative impact on her daughter's life. Eventually, Tracy broke up with Jeremy and started dating Paul Nelson. Several witnesses stated that shortly before the tragedy, Tracy had a significant argument with her mother over Jeremy and Paul, both of whom Sandra disapproved. Detectives began interviewing numerous teenagers connected to this group. It was established that Tracy's ex, Jeremy, had a volatile temperament and had even made threats against Paul. However, Paul was not the main reason for Tracy and Jeremy's breakup. That was largely due to Sandra's disapproval, which may have prompted Jeremy's hostility toward her. In fact, the relationship between Sandra and Jeremy was extremely strained. Sandra had to go to the police station to obtain a restraining order against Jeremy. He accused her of ruining his relationship with her daughter, Tracy, and threatened her, although he never acted on these threats. During drunken parties, he often expressed how much Sandra bothered him to his friends. Sandra was determined to protect her daughter from him, which only led to more conflicts. It was known that Jeremy was already on the police's radar due to his numerous violations, and the restraining order worsened the situation. He clearly held a grudge against Sandra, which raised concerns that he could have kidnapped Tracy. At this point, detectives believed that Jeremy had killed Sandra and was now holding Tracy captive. They decided to question Jeremy, who, along with his friend William Lennon, had been arrested for burglary on the 1st of the month, just a few days before Sandra's murder. Since Jeremy was in prison during the time of the murder, he could not have been involved in Sandra's death. The fate of Tracy remained uncertain. The kidnapper had not made any demands, leading the police to fear that she might already be dead, although there was still a chance she was being held hostage. Time was of the essence for her safety. When investigators spoke with Jeremy in prison, he explained that he was not in a relationship with Tracy at the time of Sandra's murder due to a restraining order that required him to avoid contact with her. As a result, they broke up. During this time, Tracy began dating another man, Paul Nelson, which led Jeremy to distance himself from her. The police noticed that Jeremy appeared to strongly dislike Paul and openly expressed a desire to confront. Jeremy accused Paul of encouraging Tracy to engage in criminal behavior and worried that she might become involved with drugs because of her relationship with him. However, he stated that he did not harbor any ill feelings toward Sandra. In fact, their communication improved once Tracy started dating Paul. As Sandra shifted her anger towards Paul, Jeremy supported Sandra during this time. On March 25th, just before Sandra's murder, Jeremy warned Tracy about her new boyfriend, Paul, whom he considered dangerous. By that time, the autopsy results were complete. The medical examiner determined that Sandra died on March 26 from 4 stab wounds and significant blunt force trauma to the head. These injuries were confirmed as the cause of death, and strangulation was also used to ensure she was dead. The police needed to locate Paul Nelson, the main suspect, to question him. However, he was missing. His parents reported that he hadn't been seen since March 26. Like Tracy, detectives believed he was involved in Sandra's murder. They needed to find him and uncover what happened to Tracy, but they could only address that after detaining him. Investigators discovered that Paul had been in regular contact with his friend Zwickle, with whom he had lived before going into hiding. When detectives spoke with Zwickle, he provided valuable information. He confirmed that Sandra did not approve of the relationship between Tracy and Paul. Sandra believed that Paul, Tracy's new boyfriend, was a bad influence and was trying to get her involved with drugs. Despite Sandra's objections, Tracy and Paul continued to meet secretly. After several weeks, Sandra found out about it and was upset. She told her daughter that getting involved with a drug addict was a big mistake. Despite this, she refused to face the truth. Her mother urged her to end the relationship with Paul. Sandra then informed Tracy that if she wanted a family and children, she would need to move in with Paul. This news surprised both Tracy and Paul, as they had nowhere to live. Sandra advised Tracy to think about ending her pregnancy, and Tracy consented. However, their relationship worsened after the abortion. A shocking moment for Tracy was when Sandra threatened to take her car keys if she didn't end her relationship with Paul. This tension may have led Paul to develop a grudge against Sandra, who he and Tracy saw as an obstacle to their relationship. Paul's friend, Zwickle, reported that on March 26, Paul returned home around 10 a.m. and immediately began packing his belongings. Paul mentioned that he was planning to leave with Tracy and that they had $2,000, which he believed would be sufficient for their escape. Paul confided in Zwickau that he and Tracy intended to run away in her car, and Zwickau assumed they were fleeing due to a disagreement. However, Paul did not mention Sandra's death to Zwickau. When Zwickau inquired about how Paul obtained the money, he claimed he had sold Sandra's tape recorder to a pawn shop. It was later discovered that tape recorder had indeed gone missing from the house after the attack. In reality, Paul was not being truthful. Selling tape recorder only netted him less than $50. It remained unclear how Paul could have acquired such a significant amount of money at that time. Afterwards, Zwickau noticed how Paul and Tracy got into a car and drove away without any signs of stress. It seemed they were heading to Mexico. Given the situation, Zwickau began to suspect that Paul might be involved in a murder. As a result, Paul and Tracy were placed on a nationwide wanted list. Investigators in Kansas identified 18-year-old Paul Nelson as the prime suspect. The police were particularly troubled by the $2,000 Paul had, which he used to flee. They wondered if he had robbed someone or committed another crime. Investigators were shocked and they examined Sandra's bank accounts. On March 26, her daughter, Tracy, withdrew money from her mother's account. While looking into this, detectives discovered that Tracy had gone to the bank with Paul and cashed a check with the teller. Tracy claimed that her mother had given her the money to buy a new car. This raised serious suspicions about her actions. A bank employee reported that Tracy and Paul were calm during the transaction and showed no signs of worry. Amid suspicions that Tracy may have been a hostage in a kidnapping, police now have new suspicions. It seemed Paul's friend, Zwickau, was telling the truth. Could Tracy actually be a willing participant in the crime instead of a hostage? To investigate further, they reached out to Tracy's best friend, Candace Kenow. Candace revealed that on March 25, Tracy had called her to share that a serious conflict had erupted with her mother. Tracy's mother had taken the car key away from her and threatened to kick her out. This created evident hostility between them. Candace mentioned that following this incident, Tracy decided to run away with Paul and admitted this during their phone conversation. The officers' doubts were confirmed. It became clear that from the very beginning, no one had actually tried to keep Tracy as a hostage. The police confirmed that Tracy and Paul had crossed the border into Mexico and subsequently got lost. After some time, a United States Border Service officer informed the police that Tracy and Paul had re-entered the U.S. near El Paso. The reason for their return was unclear, but it was evident that they were in trouble. Efforts to locate the couple intensified. On April 8, Candace contacted investigators to report that she had spoken with Tracy on the phone. Candace provided the police with Tracy's phone number. Tracy and Paul was located on the outskirts of El Paso, and later, that day, investigators apprehended Paul. Candace agreed to make another call to help detectives pinpoint the location from which Tracy had called. Tracy and Paul was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. Paul did not appear to be a dangerous gangster. He kept his eyes on the floor and trembled with fear. He explained the details of the attack, admitting that on the evening of the 25th, he had gone to the house Sandra's. Then, Tracy and Paul had devised an escape plan, and it was Tracy who proposed drastic measures. She wanted to kill her mother to prevent her from ever finding her. The next morning, Candace stopped by to pick up Tracy, and they left for school together. Meanwhile, Paul was hiding in the bedroom with a tree branch he intended to use as a weapon. He claimed he found it in the house and did not plan to kill Sandra. He only wanted to strike her so she would lose consciousness. However, the police were skeptical of his explanation. They questioned why he would sneak into the house and attack her if he didn't intend to kill her, knowing she could eventually regain consciousness and report him. It seemed clear to the investigators that his intention was murder, which would allow him to escape without being caught. Paul continued his story. He claimed that Sandra surprised him by opening the door and immediately began yelling and insulting him. In a fit of anger, he wrapped a cord around Sandra's neck and strangled her until she stopped breathing. Afterward, he covered she with a blanket and fled the scene. Meanwhile, Tracy, smiling, testified in the next room. Their accounts were similar, except for how much blame they placed on each other. Tracy asserted that she did not act alone. She claimed that she and Paul planned the murder together, but only Paul killed her mother. Tracy insisted that she had no role in the crime. She also revealed that the wooden figurine used in the murder was hidden in the backyard. The police later found the figurine there, along with Sandra's blood on it. The prosecutor's office was prepared to charge Tracy and Paul with first-degree murder. According to state law, the maximum penalty for this crime was life imprisonment. Paul's defense argued that he acted under Tracy's influence, claiming he should be guilty of manslaughter instead. Conversely, Tracy's lawyer argued that Paul was the instigator, as he was the one who strangled Sandra, while Tracy played a secondary role. The trial began on February 26, 1999, with both defense teams trying to downplay their clients' involvement in the horrific crime to lessen their possible sentences. During the trial, the young defendants, Tracy and Paul, displayed disrespectful behavior and laughed provocatively. Tracy refused to meet with her family, even though they wanted to discuss her involvement in Sandra's murder. Her brother, Chad, particularly wished to speak with her. On April 22, 1999, the court sentenced Tracy Miles and Paul Nelson to life in prison, with a minimum of 25 years before they can apply for parole. After the judge announced the sentence, Paul made an obscene gesture. Both Tracy and Paul expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict and showed no signs of remorse for their actions. In the future, Tracy and Paul will have the chance to request early release, but Sandra's relatives hope that this does not occur. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Chiara Poggi. Chiara Poggi was born in Vigai, Italy, on March 31, 1981. She studied economics and landed a job as a financier at a large company. She was a delicate girl with expressive blue eyes. She was determined to advance her career and become a manager, with the ultimate goal of starting her own business. To achieve this, she focused on her studies and graduated. Alongside her professional ambitions, Chiara also wanted to start a family. At that time, she had been in a relationship with a man named Alberto for 7 years. Unfortunately, all her dreams seemed to stop there, as fate had other plans for her. On August 13, 2007, at approximately 9:12 a.m., Chiara was going about her daily routine when someone knocked on her door. She opened it, unaware that this decision would lead to her death just a few hours later. At 1:50 p.m., Alberto called the Italian Emergency Services, 118, to report a tragedy at his girlfriend's home. Alberto had discovered Chiara's body. He explained that he had visited and found her lying in a pool of blood. When the dispatcher asked if he could help the victim, Alberto said he couldn't bear to look at the scene and had already left to contact the police. He provided the address and implied that his girlfriend was already dead when he called. When asked why he did not wait for the police at the scene, the Alberto explained that the house was located on a dead-end street, making it hard for the police to find. He decided to go to the police himself and bring them to the tragedy scene to prevent confusion. The Carabinieri arrived after being directed by the emergency services dispatcher. All the doors of the house were locked, so the officers had to climb over the fence. Once inside the kitchen, they discovered signs of a struggle. The Chiara seemed to have been attacked while cooking. Dishes were scattered, and there were open boxes containing a knitting needle, which suggested a confrontation might have taken place. The police also found initial evidence of a violent crime. There were drops of blood on the floor. And in the room near the exit, they discovered a potholder and white slippers that were later confirmed to belong to the Chiara. The carabinieri entered the next room and discovered Chiara lying face down on the steps near the basement entrance. She appeared to have been taken by surprise, as she was still wearing her pink summer pajamas. Chiara showed signs of a severe beating. It seemed she had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, likely a hammer. The police officers quickly spotted important evidence in the pool of blood, a strand of hair that obviously did not belong to Chiara and a distinctive shoe print left in the dried blood. The lack of warmth in the Chiara's body suggested that she had been killed a few hours earlier. The police quickly contacted Chiara's parents. Rita, the mother, was on vacation in Trentino and had missed the call. She called back around 3:30 p.m. and was so distraught by the news that she nearly fainted. She rushed back to the city. When Rita arrived at the police station, her husband, Giuseppe, Chiara's father, was there. Nicola Stassi, Alberto's father, was also there when his son was brought to the station. Alberto called his father for support. Alberto, 20, shared his story of events with the police by the time Chiara's parents arrived. Alberto said he called Chiara at 9:45 a.m., but she did not answer. He was not concerned at first, thinking she might still be asleep. After noon, he made several attempts to contact her on both her cell phone and her home phone, but received no response. At 11:15 a.m., he decided to go play golf. After returning from his match at around 12:30 p.m., Alberto found all of Chiara's doors locked and she was not answering his phone calls. Worried, he climbed over the fence and tried to open the door, but it was locked. He then broke in through the kitchen window, the only way into the house. Inside, he found the TV on. At first, he thought Chiara might still be asleep in her room. However, when he could not find her, he went into the kitchen and saw drops of blood on the dishes. He then went into the living room, where he discovered her body, leaving him in shock. It's strange that he didn't approach Chiara to check on her or try to help. Instead, he ran to get the investigator. At that moment, she was still alive, and she might have been saved. Rather than ensuring his girlfriend was okay or providing first aid, he left the house and headed to the police station. Once in the car, he called for an ambulance. During the police interrogation, they noticed his odd behavior and questioned why he didn't check if the girl was breathing. Instead of helping her, he just ran away and called the police. Alberto explained that he was scared and confused, which led him to call for help right away. However, he could have stayed, called for medics, and waited for the ambulance while performing CPR. He claimed he left because he felt unsafe in the house after the attack and sought protection from police. The Alberto spent the entire day at the police station and around midnight. He was getting ready to meet with the police again to answer their questions. Meanwhile, forensic experts were carefully examining the crime scene and were puzzled by a footprint found in a pool of the Chiara's blood. They asked Alberto to show them his shoes. He was wearing special white golf shoes that were spotless. He claimed he had been wearing them when he arrived at his girlfriend's house. However, this raised suspicions because the floor around the body was covered in blood. How could someone walk around in such a bloody scene without getting any blood on their shoes? There wasn't a single drop of blood on the soles, and the Alberto couldn't provide a clear explanation for this. The police decided to question Alberto about his relationship with Chiara, the murdered girl. Alberto described their relationship as wonderful, claiming they had very few problems. Like any couple, they occasionally argued, but these conflicts were minor and quickly resolved. The police then asked him for more details about the events leading up to her death to help establish a timeline and identify any suspicious activity. However, Alberto offered no significant information. The police took his fingerprints and ultimately released him due to a lack of evidence, keeping him at the police station for just under a day. Finally, around 7 a.m., Alberto got into his father's car and went home. On August 17th, when police examined the search history and files on Alberto's computer, he claimed he woke up early that morning, around 9 a.m., and was working on his thesis while trying to call his girlfriend, after which he went to play golf. Evidence confirmed that he was home, fed his dog, and then left the house. Although it seemed that Alberto had an alibi, the police remained suspicious. The police continued their investigation to reconstruct the timeline of the attack. They were particularly focused on how the crime occurred and still needed to identify the murder weapon. Based on the condition of the Chiara's body, it appeared the attacker used a metal object, possibly something like a hammer with a pointed end or an ice pick. At that point, the forensic report indicated that Chiara was likely murdered between 9 and 10 in the morning. When the police examined the prime Alberto's mobile phone records, they discovered that his mother called him daily just before 10 a.m. Elizabeth, the mother, confirmed that she spoke to her son that day to check on a friend, seemingly validating his alibi and suggesting he could not have committed the murder during that time. However, upon further investigation of the call logs, the police found that the mother did not call her son that day, raising suspicions. Alberto's motives are unclear. Friends confirmed that Chiara and Alberto had a wonderful relationship, with only minor disagreements that are typical of any young couple. A friend named Marco saw Alberto the day after the tragic event and noticed that Alberto seemed distressed. He refused to eat and spoke very little, often expressing his deep sadness over Chiara's death. Meanwhile, the investigation was progressing. The police had gathered preliminary investigation materials, autopsy reports, and numerous witness testimonies about the couple. After August 20th, forensic experts continued analyzing the evidence, including hair found in a pool of blood that did not belong to the Chiara. They also examined materials collected from under Chiara's fingernails. Additionally, several blood splatters were discovered in the house that did not seem to match Chiara's, suggesting they might belong to the assailant. On the morning of August 22nd, Alberto visited the police station to obtain some documents. He spent a few hours speaking with the police, who were hoping to gather new information from him. Additionally, at 2 p.m., Alberto was scheduled to take part in an interrogation with the prosecutor present. With police showing increased interest, the Alberto was preparing for his meeting with his lawyer. By this time, Alberto had already spent over 26 hours at the station, providing the police with all the information they requested. He repeated his account of the events from August 13th. But the police were more focused on the evening of the 12th, the night before the bloody massacre took place. That night, the couple ordered 2 pizzas from a nearby restaurant and spent the evening eating and watching TV. Alberto then went home. Police scrutinized every detail of his statement for any inconsistencies, especially questioning why Alberto left after dinner. Throughout the investigation, Alberto repeatedly maintained that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend Chiara's death. The prosecution remained skeptical. He questions why there was no blood on Alberto's white sneakers as he moved around the house. Was he really that cautious? Why did Alberto leave on the night of the 12th instead of staying with Chiara? And why did he not help her when he found her unconscious? Unexpectedly, Chiara's neighbor provided some information. At around 9 a.m., she noticed a bicycle parked near the entrance to Chiara's house. As a cyclist, she found this strange, as she had never seen Chiara or Alberto riding such a bicycle. Later, the bicycle was spotted near Chiara's fence. The neighbor, who was knowledgeable about bicycles, realized that it was a women's model equipped with unusual accessories not usually found on regular bicycles. The woman did not think about what would happen next. She looked out her window around 10 o'clock or 10:30 a.m. and noticed that the vehicle was no longer by the neighbor's fence. This information caught the police's attention, as it might be an important clue. The police realized that finding this bike could significantly advance their investigation, as locating the owner might lead them to the killer. However, their search for this type of bike hit a dead end because the description provided was too vague. Later, another neighbor, a 47-year-old woman, contacted the police. She reported seeing a bike near Chiara's house at 9:30 a.m. and confirmed it was a women's model with a new color, although some details did not match. It's possible that one of the neighbors had remembered those details incorrectly. Meanwhile, over several days, several lawyers defended Alberto, including his brothers, Giulio and Giuseppe Colli, who worked in the Vigevano Bar Association. However, by this time, the police had discovered the complicated love story between Chiara and Alberto. The love between the Chiara and Alberto was genuine, and their relationship was going well. This was evident to those who knew them and was reflected in their frequent exchanges of affectionate messages. They hardly ever argued, and when they did, the disagreements were minor and quickly resolved. However, in the week leading up to the incident, some unusual changes were observed in their relationship. It seems that Chiara has recently stopped wanting to see Alberto, and they have started sleeping in separate rooms even when he stays overnight. Alberto attributes this behavior to the fact that he prefers to sleep in a double bed in Chiara's brother's room, where he finds it more comfortable. There were very few photographs of the couple together, raising concerns about their relationship. Instead, the Alberto's secret folder contained hundreds of photos of women's feet in shoes, leading to suspicions that the couple's seemingly happy exterior was hiding deeper issues. This raised the question, could Alberto's unusual fetish have been connected to the murder? The case took a dramatic turn 43 days after Chiara's death, when police discovered Alberto's sister's bicycle, matching a neighbor's description. Blood was found on the pedals, which was later confirmed through laboratory testing to be Chiara's. However, Alberto's sister had a solid alibi, as she was at work at the time of the incident. Initially, Alberto was believed to have borrowed his sister's bicycle. The family and the community were shocked. They did not believe Chiara's boyfriend was guilty until the very end. However, when traces of her DNA were found on the pedals of the bike, they had no choice but to accept his guilt. Relatives were also shocked by Alberto's behavior. He met with them several times after the tragedy and still steadfastly maintained his innocence. The parents displayed clear signs of their grief. The lawyer passionately defended his client, trying to explain the presence of the Chiara's blood on the pedals, despite the significant amount found, which was not just a few drops. The defense attempted to dismiss this evidence by suggesting it could be related to menstruation and other implausible theories. Ultimately, despite these efforts, Alberto was arrested. On September 28, the judge reviewed the case file and determined that there was not enough evidence against the suspect, leading to Alberto's immediate release from prison. The case file was then sent back to the prosecution for further examination. Police had found a significant amount of specific pornographic material on the Alberto's computer. They believed that his girlfriend might have discovered his secret fetish, which could have caused tension between them. A conflict arose, and this seems plausible considering that on August 12, the day before the incident, the Alberto had been working on his laptop at Chiara's place and had left it there, giving her access to the stored information. Alberto had many photographs of women's shoes that he seemed to have taken himself, particularly during a recent trip to London shortly before his relationship with Chiara started to decline. Additionally, there were images capturing private moments between the Chiara and Alberto. These photos were blurred, but the girl appeared to be quite embarrassed in them. It's possible that the Alberto's specific preferences in intimacy contributed to their disagreements. Alberto acknowledged that he has certain fetishes, but he claimed that the Chiara always accepted, and it never caused any issues between them. On November 3, 2008, Alberto was charged once more. Police believed they had sufficient evidence to link him to Chiara's murder. It was clear that the Alberto knew the victim well, as he had unrestricted access to her home. This was supported by the fact that nothing was broken or stolen, and that Chiara was found wearing her home clothes. The strongest evidence was a footprint found in Chiara's blood. It was a size 42 shoe print that matched the Alberto's foot size. After committing the crime, Alberto replaced his old shoes with a brand new pair that he wore during his first interrogation. Despite blood prints being found on the bicycle pedals, he persisted in denying any involvement. It seems he successfully disposed of the sneakers he wore when he left the Chiara's house after the murder. On February 24, 2009, during the preliminary hearing, the prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence. Although they had initially requested a life sentence, after reviewing the case documents, the judge determined that further improvements were needed. He identified many of the evidence as being implausible. Extensive research was conducted, including a reconstruction of the events using computer models. A comprehensive model of Chiara's house was built, allowing the police to track the killer's movements. On August 13, 2009, a detailed report was submitted to the court. According to this report, the Alberto turned on his computer at 9:35 a.m. and viewed several pornographic photographs. He continued this activity until 12:20 p.m. and identified only 3 possible time intervals during which the murder could have occurred. The house alarm was deactivated at 9:12 a.m., and there is no information about Alberto's activities between then and 9:35 a.m. The second time window for the murder was from 12:20 p.m. to 12:46 p.m., as the Alberto called Chiara's mobile phone from his home shortly after 12:46 p.m. There was also a time frame available for the murder from 12:46 p.m. to 1:26 p.m. The forensic expert determined that the Chiara likely died between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, suggesting that the earlier time frame was more plausible. Meanwhile, the defense pointed out several mistakes made by the police during the investigation. The forensic expert noted that evidence was mishandled. There were numerous errors and inconsistencies, including the failure to collect the Chiara's fingerprints. Police also did not investigate other people who may have used the bicycle seen near Chiara's house, which weakened the prosecution's case. Additionally, the provisional time frame established suggests that Alberto had no more than 23 minutes to commit the crime, set up the scene, escape, and dispose of the shoes. Alberto lived a mile from Chiara's house, and if he had been able to ride his bicycle to Chiara's house, it would have been physically difficult and inconsistent with the timeline of events. Despite this, the prosecution believed he could have done so. On December 17th, the judge left the courtroom to consider his verdict. The prosecution asked for a 30-year prison sentence. However, they failed to present convincing evidence of his guilt. There were no bloody shoes, video footage, witness testimony, or obvious motives linking Alberto to the murder. Ultimately, the judge found Alberto not guilty. The verdict shocked the local community, which had expected a different outcome and labeled Alberto a murderer. However, the case did not end there. Chiara's family filed an appeal on November 8, 2011, leading to a new trial. This hearing lasted several weeks, during which the public and media were barred from the courtroom, allowing journalists only to enter when the decision was announced. The court acquitted the Alberto Stasi once more during a retrial on April 18, 2013. The lawyer emphasized that the charges lacked grounding and that there was insufficient evidence. He also argued that it would have been impossible for Alberto to commit the murder and cover up the evidence in just 23 minutes. Following the death of Alberto's father, who was killed in a Pavia hospital on April 9, 2014, a new phase in the investigation began. This phase included various pieces of evidence, such as computer modeling and a thorough analysis of a bicycle found in the Alberto's home. Unexpectedly, during this investigation, Alberto confessed to murdering Chiara. The case was so complex that without this confession, he likely would have been acquitted again. However, under public pressure, he ultimately admitted his guilt. On December 17, 2014, 37-year-old Alberto Stasi received a 16-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €1 million in compensation to the Chiara's family. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Dickason family. From the outside, the Dickason family appeared perfect. They had everything needed for happiness, a loving mother and a devoted father who was willing to do anything for his family's well-being. Although they lived together in a small unit, they harbored many dark secrets that would surprise an outsider. For years, the Dickason family faced deep-rooted issues that ultimately resulted in brutal murders. This tragic event took place in September 2021. One significant factor that contributed to this horrific outcome was depression, which can be devastating. Today, we will share one of the most heartbreaking stories from the criminal world. Lauren Dickason, who lived in South Africa. She had a difficult childhood that made it hard for her to connect with teachers and other children. As a result, she often felt isolated and was frequently excluded from holidays and birthday celebrations. This experience contributed to mental health issues that began during her teenage years. Lauren is very anxious and struggles to control her emotions, always seeing threats in everyday situations. Despite her difficulties, she has had a passion for medicine since she was a child. After finishing school, she went to university and eventually became a general practitioner. In the following years, while working, Lauren met Graham, an orthopedic doctor, and they began dating. Despite their different medical specializations, they quickly developed a close bond and fell in love. Graham was outgoing and sociable, which complemented Lauren's more reserved nature. Their relationship seemed harmonious as they balanced each other's weaknesses. With Graham's influence, Lauren became more cheerful and open. They got married in May 2006. At that time, they lived in Pretoria, South Africa, where they built a house on nearly a hectare of land. The house had 4 bedrooms, a gym, a swimming pool. As they started their married life, Lauren shifted her career focus to gynecology and neurological diseases. However, almost from the beginning of her attempts to get pregnant, she decided to put her career on hold to have children. In 2012, Lauren returned to work at the medical center, but she was no longer a practicing physician. Instead, she became a part-time manager and her husband's assistant. The couple faced challenges conceiving due to health issues. Despite these difficulties, they were eager to have children. In 2013, they sought help from fertility specialists. After successful treatment, they welcomed a baby girl named Sarah, but she was born prematurely at 18 weeks. Sadly, Sarah did not survive. The loss was a shock to Lauren, who grieved every day for the next 2 months. The couple continued to consult with fertility specialists but continued to face challenges conceiving. Lauren underwent 17 rounds of IVF, often with low success rates. They eventually decided to use donor eggs and their first daughter, Leanne, was born. The family was very anxious during the pregnancy. Lauren feared another negative outcome and the possibility of losing the baby again. After Leanne was born, Lauren suffered from mental health issues. In 2015, doctors diagnosed her with anxiety, postpartum depression, and major depressive disorder when Leanne was just 18 months old. In response to the situation, Graham took a leave of absence to care for their daughter, and other family members stepped in to help. Following the doctor's advice, Lauren managed her illness with medication. Despite the challenges, the couple remained hopeful about having a second child, and after a few years, Lauren became pregnant again. An ultrasound revealed that she was expecting twins, which excited the parents as their family was set to grow. However, during the examination, they learned that one of the girls had a cleft palate, which caused Lauren significant anxiety. Fortunately, It was later discovered that the condition was not as serious as initially thought, which brought relief to Lauren's family. In 2018, twins Maya and Carla were born earlier than expected when they were in their 5th month. A successful surgery to correct the birth defect was performed. The family handled the ordeal well. After the surgery, Lauren and Graham decided to hire a nanny to help care for the family. The issues surrounding the birth left Lauren feeling anxious and compounded by panic attacks. Her husband Graham described her as an extremely anxious mother, constantly worrying about their children. Lauren was overprotective, often watching their every move, which irritated the kids. Despite these challenges, they managed to overcome many of the difficulties. The Dickinson family was relatively well off, allowing them to hire a maid, gardener, and nanny to help ease the stress on Lauren, who struggled with her mental health. By 2020, the Dickinson family had sold their house and land and moved abroad. They chose to rent a comfortable apartment. This new living situation has significantly improved their family relationships. For the first time in 10 years, Lauren stopped taking antidepressants. By March 2021, she was off all medications and had good mental health. This positive change inspired her to start doing CrossFit at least 3 times a week to stay in shape. In addition, she overcame her eating disorder. This change gave her a more positive outlook on life. Graham noticed positive changes in Lauren and was relieved that she seemed to have overcome her previous health problems. However, their happiness did not last long. By June 2021, Lauren's depression had returned. As a result, Lauren decided to see her psychiatrist again, who prescribed her antidepressants after she described feeling depressed and isolated. The Dickinson family was in a difficult situation. Graham was often home because he did not work, and the children became very attached to him, always wanting him around. As a result, Lauren felt left out and she often argued with her children, who preferred to be with their father. Although they appeared to be a happy family on the surface, things were actually very tense and could explode at any moment. In July 2021, South Africa experienced a series of riots that heightened Lauren's anxiety. The violent protests triggered panic within her family, prompting them to quickly decide to move to New Zealand, which they saw as a quieter and safer place. This move was also strategic, as Graham's parents lived there. However, their hopes were met with numerous challenges. Immigrating under such circumstances carried the risk of being denied a residence permit due to chronic illness or health conditions. To hide her struggles from the authorities, Lauren stopped taking her antidepressants shortly before the move. Her psychiatrist had told her that she was stable and no longer needed medication. Nevertheless, the pressure of the immigration process caused Lauren significant stress, worsened by her insomnia. She was only getting 2 hours of sleep each night because of the increased workload. Before the move, she began taking another medication in August 2021. The Dickinson family left South Africa on August 2nd. Lauren later described the trip as one of the most difficult times of her life, filled with anxiety about their future in New Zealand. Upon arriving in New Zealand, they settled in Timaru, a quiet town of about 30,000. The family's struggles continued. Their living conditions in New Zealand were not much better than in South Africa, with frequent power outages. In addition, Graham had to return to work earlier than expected, adding to the Dickinson family's stress. Graham started working at a hospital in Timaru and started his shift. Lauren hoped that they would have more time to deal with the challenges of moving house and adjusting to a new. Lauren felt overwhelmed with family issues and was left to care for 3 young children on her own without any support. On the appointed day, the Dickinson family went to the immigration office and were selected as potential citizens, while many other families faced rejection. Their application was accepted and they were told to wait for a response. The couple then went to a local Christian school to enroll their child in kindergarten. Graham noticed that during this time, Lauren seemed particularly sad, as if a dark cloud was hanging over her. She seemed far from the cheerful person who shared her life on social media. Even the smallest setback would send her spiraling deeper into depression. During this challenging period, Lauren kept in touch with her new friend Letitia through social media. She attempted to call Letitia, who had recently moved, to invite her to dinner, but her messages went unanswered. Meanwhile, Lauren and her spouse were looking for a rental property, but all the houses within their budget were in poor condition. They were temporarily staying in a house provided by the hospital, which only added to Lauren's stress as she was already feeling overwhelmed. However, on the night of September 14, 2021, Lauren had trouble sleeping. The next day, she had to take Maya and Carla to kindergarten and take Leanne to school. The morning was lively as the children, excited about their early rise and packing, chose their outfits without noticing their Lauren's fatigue. After dropping them off at school, Lauren returned home and lay down to rest. At 10:47 a.m., she received a photo from her kindergarten teacher showing her twins eating lunch at their table. Then Lauren cleaned the house, organizing her belongings because her family had just moved here. After running errands all day, Lauren picked up the girls from daycare and school around 3 p.m. and took them to the playground. Later, at home, Carla threw a tantrum because she missed their dad, who was at work. The other twin, Maya, had recently fallen out of bed and hurt her stitches. The girls cried so much that Lauren felt like a bad mother, trying to comfort them when they ignored her attempts to comfort them. Lauren cooked chicken nuggets for the children, but they were not satisfied with the meal. This led to a breaking point for her. Feeling overwhelmed, Lauren bathed the children and put them to bed around 6 p.m. Although she received several messages from friends in South Africa, she did not have time to reply to all of them. Graham returned home from work, had a quick dinner, and then left for an important meeting at 7 p.m. While he was away, chaos erupted in the house. About 20 minutes after he left, the children began to scream. In an attempt to calm them down, Lauren went to the garage to get some zip ties. Lauren told the children they were going to weave a necklace and placed the zip ties around their necks. No idea what was going on and were happily playing along. However, Leanne was angry with her mother and criticized what she was doing. For Leanne, it was not a game. In a fit of rage, Lauren began suffocating her children with pillows and blankets. She said that she was very sick and would soon die, and that she was killing her children because she was afraid that no one would take care of them. After Lauren believed the children were dead, she attempted to end your life. Lauren cut herself with a knife, but the blade was too dull to cut deeply. Ultimately, she resorted to pills, consuming several large doses of various medications. But these were not enough to end her life. In a moment of confusion, Lauren collapsed on the kitchen floor, lost in her thoughts about her actions. At that moment, Graham came home. He noticed something was wrong with her and asked if she was okay, but she responded in a way he couldn't understand. Sensing something was very wrong, he rushed upstairs to check on the kids. Going up to the room, he hoped everything was okay, but instead, he found the lifeless bodies of his children on the bed. The horrifying reality unfolded before his eyes. In desperation, he sought help. With the help of colleagues at a nearby hospital, he ran out into the street to meet one of them. As he closed the door behind him, the last thing he saw was Lauren lying on the floor with her eyes closed. He didn't know if she was alive, his only concern was his daughters. So he didn't check on Lauren. A friend at the hospital tried to revive the children, but their efforts were in vain. Around 9:40 p.m., neighbors heard a loud noise, which turned out to be a door slamming as Graham rushed outside. Soon after, they heard sobbing and screaming coming from the house. Graham approached the house and admitted that everything was his fault. He was distressed about leaving the children with their mother, who was not mentally stable. Neighbors called emergency services, and the police and ambulance arrived around 10 p.m. Officers discovered the bodies of the murdered children in the house. The twins, Maya and Carla, aged 2, and their 6-year-old, Leanne, had been killed. In the kitchen, police found Lauren alive and conscious. She answered their questions but spoke very softly. The Lauren appeared to be in shock. The police discovered shallow cuts on her hands and forearms. When asked if she had used any illegal drugs that evening, she denied it. Later, police found 9 medication bottles in her trash, along with a package containing hundreds of cable ties. A toxicological examination revealed that her blood did not contain any illegal drugs or alcohol, but it did show high levels of antidepressants, sedatives, and other medications. 40-year-old Lauren was promptly arrested and taken to the hospital for help. The brutal murders of the Dickinson family shocked the local community and then spread throughout New Zealand and South Africa. The nanny who worked for the family was speechless when she heard the news. She struggled to accept that it was true. In an interview, the nanny described Lauren, Graham, and their children as an ideal family, saying that she had never witnessed any arguments or conflicts within their household. The nanny firmly believed that Lauren loved her children deeply. She last saw the children in June 2021, when the Dickinson family was excited about moving to New Zealand. After Lauren was taken into custody, Graham had to return to South Africa because his visa was expiring in December 2021. He later returned to participate in the trial. He communicated with Lauren and found it hard to believe that she had harmed the children. The day after her arrest, Lauren woke up in the hospital. She was in disbelief about her situation and was even more shocked, and the police entered her room and accused her of killing 3 girls. On September 18th, Lauren Dickinson was officially charged with triple murder. Lauren admitted to the crime but stated that she did not want to harm her children. She explained that her actions stemmed from her mental instability and the overwhelming challenges she faced as a mother. Lauren expressed feelings of inadequacy in her parenting, struggling to manage her children, who were often screaming. Eventually, the stress became unbearable for her. She recounted how she killed her children, first Carla, then Leanne, and finally Maya, using pillows and blankets to suffocate them. Although Lauren denied experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations, her lawyer requested a psychiatric evaluation following the preliminary court hearing. During this time, Lauren refused to eat and lost weight, dropping to 47 kilograms. Her physical and mental health issues delayed the case for a month, leading to the rescheduling of the hearing for July 2023, nearly 2 years after the tragic events. In court, Lauren's lawyers sought to focus on her mental health struggles as part of their defense strategy. New Zealand law is very lenient towards those who commit crimes against children, especially in cases of manslaughter, where the offender can receive a suspended sentence. It was important for the defense to show that Lauren's actions were a response to extreme stress, showing that she considered killing her child a form of self-defense. The trial began on July 17, 2023, and lasted 4 weeks. Attorneys have said that Lauren had suffered from years of health problems and struggled with depression. Her mental health struggles led her to consider killing her daughter as a way to deliverance. Tensions had recently escalated between Lauren and her children. They often disobeyed her, which led her to resort to physical punishment and consider sedatives. During the trial, Graham revealed that Lauren had raised concerns about the children's safety on 3 separate occasions, but he had not taken them seriously. Each time he left the house, he felt remorse. In May 2019, Lauren expressed a desire to smother their daughters with pillows. In July 2011, she mentioned wanting to cut their femoral arteries in the bathroom. Despite these alarming statements, they were not considered serious at the time. Lauren has a hard time managing her spoiled twins, expressing her frustration by saying, "Children drive she crazy." They are wild, brazen, and disobedient. She tired of them. She wish I could start over and make different choices. Lauren had to face many difficulties to become a parent, making it difficult for others to believe that she could hurt the children. During the trial, Graham described her difficulties in raising her children. He rarely saw her show affection to her children, and they did not seem to seek her out. This became especially evident when he was home more often and the children clung to him, leaving Lauren without the opportunity to play with them. He sensed something was wrong, but attributed it to her withdrawn personality and inability to participate in fun activities. Graham mentioned that New Zealand did not meet Lauren's expectations. The new country felt completely different from what she had envisioned. This led to a significant cultural shock from everything she encountered. Graham expressed forgiveness towards his wife, believing she was overwhelmed by the challenges she faced. He urged others to forgive her and pray for Lauren. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office aimed to demonstrate that the triple murder was premeditated. They presented evidence showing that the actions were methodical and intentional, including search engine queries. The Lauren had repeatedly searched for lethal doses of various medications for children and methods of strangulation. Additionally, she had confided her disturbing plans to family members on several occasions. The prosecutor argued that the Lauren was frustrated and angry with her children because she felt unable to manage them and was resentful towards them, believing that the girls negatively impacted her relationship with her husband. Psychiatrists confirmed that the Lauren was likely in an unstable mental state at the time of the crime. Experts noted that Lauren was experiencing significant anxiety during this period. On August 14, 2013, the jury began reviewing the evidence in the case, which included hundreds of pages of research reports and documents from police and experts. After initial deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a consensus on Lauren's guilt. They returned to the office to review detailed police footage of the victim's parents, which took more than 15 hours and lasted 2 days. On August 16, after a hearing at Christchurch, Lauren's attorney, and Tui, said the best place for Lauren to serve her sentence was in hospital, a placement that all 3 mental health professionals who evaluated her agreed with. Lauren Dickinson will be detained at hospital pending assessment before a sentencing date is finalized. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Teresa Parker. Teresa Parker was born on September 9, 1965, to Claire and William. The family initially lived in San Diego, California. They later moved to a home in Lafayette, Georgia, where they settled permanently. Teresa had 5 siblings. She was the middle child. Her friendly and kind nature made her popular with all her relatives. In 1984, Teresa graduated from high school. Soon after, she married her first love. After a while, the couple separated in the early 90s. Teresa completed her training and became a switchboard operator for the city police department, quickly becoming a favorite of the police officers. One of those who loved her was Sam Park, born in 1956 in Lafayette. He had an older sister named Caroline and a younger brother named Kenneth. Sam had a close relationship with his father. Overall, he was a kind and intelligent person. In his spare time, he enjoyed exploring the outskirts of the city, hunting and fishing in the many freshwater bodies nearby. When Sam turned 18, he joined the military and later became a police officer. In the early 1980s, his younger brother Kenneth admired him and chose a similar career, serving in the Marine Corps before joining the police department. Inspired by Sam, Kenneth decided to go to law school. For Sam, becoming a police officer was a lifelong dream. During his career, he once saved a child from a burning building. When Teresa, a beautiful 20-year-old new switchboard operator, joined the police department, she caught the attention of many of the officers, including Sam. They quickly became friends, and before long, Sam asked her out. Their relationship blossomed and they became a couple. However, some of Teresa's relatives noticed that Sam sometimes had difficulty controlling his jokes and could easily get angry. Both Teresa and Sam had experienced failed relationships in the past. Teresa had been married once, while Sam had been married twice. He saw his new relationship with Teresa as an opportunity to start over. The couple married on September 11, 1993. Teresa, 28, married Sam Parker, 37, who had just been promoted to city police sergeant. Although the early years of their marriage were happy, their relationship began to deteriorate over time. They argued frequently, and the conflicts were severe. There were concerns that Sam might have violent tendencies. They later filed for divorce in August 2006, after nearly 13 years together. However, by the winter of 2006, they had reconciled and decided to continue their relationship. In March 2007, Teresa decided to end their relationship and went on vacation to Mexico without her husband. After returning from vacation, Teresa started looking for a new place to live in another city, while Sam would stay in their old house. She took a few days off to move and settle into her new home. The next day she moved her belongings to a new apartment. Then she visited her sister, Christina, who now lived near her. In the evening, Teresa left Christina's house. She drove her SUV back home. At around 10:30 a.m., she visited her good friend Rhonda's house. Although she had planned to go to her old house to move her belongings, she decided to stay longer to make sure that Sam had gone out and did not see her. She wanted to avoid any arguments. Rhonda was surprised that the once loving couple were now avoiding each other. Teresa revealed that Sam had always been short-tempered and aggressive, especially when he was drinking. They then ended their conversation. Rhonda went to bed while Teresa went to her ex-husband's house. The next morning at 6 a.m., Rhonda called her. Someone answered the phone, but there was silence on the other end. After a moment of silence, the call was disconnected. Rhonda tried to contact Teresa several more times but only got her voicemail. Rhonda called all the numbers Teresa had used, including her work number, but none of them worked. Concerned, Rhonda then contacted the police station to request a welfare check on Teresa, who did not return her calls. In the workplace, everyone was worried about Teresa's absence because she had never missed a shift before. A police team was sent to check on her at her ex-husband Sam's house. About half an hour after the call, around 6:30 a.m., the police arrived at Sam's house but got no response when they knocked on the door. They then searched the area, looking through the windows. They hoped to find Teresa's car to make sure she was okay, but only Sam's pickup truck was in the garage. The police then went to Teresa's new apartment, but no one answered the door there either, so they left without any information. The police later found Teresa's SUV near her ex-husband's house. No one saw her, even Sam tried calling her many times to ask about her. Initially, her relatives weren't too worried, thinking that Teresa was busy arranging her new apartment and might not have heard her phone while cleaning. However, it was unusual for her not to answer any calls, as that was not her typical behavior. The day passed without any updates on Teresa. Christina had a hunch that Teresa was in danger. Teresa's family then officially reported her missing to the sheriff. From the beginning, the police treated the case as a top priority. They sent several officers to talk to Teresa's ex-husband, Sam, to gather information about the events leading up to her disappearance. The Georgia Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved in the case. They had known about Teresa's family's domestic violence for years. On May 4, 2002, police were called by Teresa's neighbors to report that Sam was drunk and extremely aggressive. He had been drinking all day and was violent toward Teresa. The patrol officer observed a bruise on Teresa's face, indicating that she had recently been beaten. Despite this, she chose not to file charges against her husband. The next incident occurred on April 27, 2003, while they were on vacation in Florida. They were dining at a restaurant when her husband became intoxicated and began threatening to kill Teresa in front of others. She then attempted to leave the parking lot in her car. At that point, Sam pulled out his service weapon and fired several shots into the car. Even after the police arrived, he continued to verbally abuse her and denied firing his weapon. When Teresa accused him of something, Sam threatened to commit and end his own life. As a result, Sam was taken to a mental health facility in Florida, where he was held for 72 hours for evaluation. Doctors were particularly concerned about his disturbing statements, such as his claim that he knew how to dispose of a body without leaving a trace. Additionally, Sam had extensive experience concealing evidence. He is very familiar with the local area, including the least frequented locations. Kayla, Sam's ex-wife, described him as an alcoholic. When he drank, he became aggressive and violent. She recounted an incident where he smashed a glass on the floor in a fit of rage. Then grabbed her by the hair and dragged her through the broken pieces. He then chained her to the bed and only released her in the morning when he left for work. He also strangled Kayla and threatened her with a gun. She eventually escaped the abusive relationship by moving to another city to get away from him. The police were eager to solve Teresa's case quickly, especially since it involved 2 police officers, which would affect the reputation of the police department. They began by investigating Teresa's new apartment and Sam's house. When police arrived at Teresa's apartment, they found a note on the door from the courier saying that Teresa's order could not be delivered. Inside the house, everything appeared normal, with several cardboard boxes filled with Teresa's belongings. The police then searched Sam's home 5 times, which frustrated him, especially when they confiscated his hunting weapons for examination. Ultimately, the searches yielded no clues to Teresa's disappearance. All of her belongings, including her money and phone, were left behind. There was no activity on her bank accounts, so the possibility of her running away was rejected. At the end of March 2007, the entire Lafayette community was in confusion. Teresa had disappeared and no one knew where she was. This left everyone worried and many avoiding going out after dark. Those close to her suspected that Sam had something to do with it. However, Sam also expressed concern about Teresa's disappearance. He explained that she wanted to avoid divorce proceedings, so she ran away. However, this explanation did not seem reasonable. Hundreds of residents volunteered to assist police in searching for Teresa. Police made numerous attempts to locate her. Divers searched all local waters, and areas such as underwater caves were explored with robotic cameras. Posters with Teresa's image were placed on billboards and flyers were distributed throughout the community. During the search, police found no sign of her. The situation was further complicated by the rugged terrain, which included dense forests, numerous small lakes, and mountains. The police questioned everyone who knew Teresa. Within a week, the police had interviewed over 100 people. During these interviews, it became clear that Sam had a volatile personality, was extremely jealous, and lost control when he drank. Meanwhile, Teresa was determined to save their marriage. She kept her husband's abuse a secret and did not share it with anyone, although her relatives suspected that there were serious problems in their family. In March 2007, everyone was relieved when Teresa decided to divorce her husband, and they supported her decision. However, Sam's family had a different view of him. They described him as cheerful and kind, and although he struggled with alcoholism. Sam's brother claimed that most of their conflicts were actually caused by Teresa's actions, rather than by Sam. Only Sam's younger sister spoke up, saying that he did have a quick temper and, unlike Teresa, he often escalated conflicts instead of stopping them. On March 25, police interviewed Sam. At the time, he was not considered a suspect. However, during the interview, he provided information that contradicted what police knew. Sam claimed that he saw Teresa's car in the parking lot when he went fishing that morning. This claim was dismissed by police, as they did not find her car at the house at the time. The car later appeared near the house, but no one witnessed how it got there. He also falsely claimed that he had not contacted Teresa, but police discovered several calls he had made to her that morning. While this may seem like a small lie, it aroused suspicion, leading the investigation to take a closer look at Sam. Sam presented a different version of events. He suggested that Teresa may have run off with her boyfriend, Elvis, whom she had allegedly met on a recent trip to Cancun, Mexico. To investigate this claim, police traveled to Mexico. They interviewed hundreds of people, including tour guides, hotel staff, and local residents. However, they found no clues or evidence to support the story, nor could they identify her boyfriend, Elvis, which led them to doubt his story. Despite growing concerns about the case, Sam continued to deny any involvement in the crime. On April 3, police arrested a man in connection with Teresa's disappearance. To the shock of many, it was not Sam who was arrested, but his colleague, Ben Chapin. Police kept the details of the arrest secret. Ben was eventually released and cleared of any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Sam was fired from the police department after 25 years of service due to his abusive behavior toward his ex-wives. He was permanently banned from returning to the force after his suspension. An internal investigation into Sam discovered explosives in his personal locker. The investigation into Teresa's case took months. Police were initially puzzled when Teresa's car returned to a parking lot near Sam's home. They discovered blood stains and signs of thorough cleaning in the car. Additionally, the trunk mat was missing. DNA analysis showed a sample belonged to Teresa, while they also found Sam's DNA in the same location. The police decided to arrest Sam. On February 4, 2008, nearly a year after Teresa's disappearance, police arrived at Sam's home, opened the door, and were arrested without resistance. The next day, he faced multiple charges, including murdering Teresa, invasion of privacy via computer, violation of public servant's oath, and invasion of citizen privacy. He was held without bail. Despite these charges, Sam maintained his innocence. Teresa's family, meanwhile, continued to insist that Sam was responsible for her disappearance, insisting that she feared him and did not want to return home. Despite the murder charges against Teresa, police have yet to find her body. Under state judicial practice, the chances of the prosecution winning the case are slim. Traditionally, few murderers have been convicted in cases where the victim's body is missing. As a result, the prosecution relied heavily on witness testimony, including Sam's ex-wives and Teresa's relatives. On August 17, 2009, in Walker County Superior Court, the prosecution alleged that Sam Parker had a history of violence against all of his ex-wives and was involved in an attempted murder. Sam had once confessed to his doctor that, as a police officer, he knew how to effectively hide a body. The prosecution detailed an incident that occurred when Teresa came to Sam's house to collect some of her belongings. They then got into an argument. During the argument, he killed Teresa, put her body in the trunk of her car. He then disposed of her body and carefully washed the car to remove any evidence. He then called his friend Ben and confessed that he had shot Teresa and planned to hide her body somewhere where it would never be discovered. He asked Ben to keep this conversation a secret. Ben shared his story just before the trial after reaching a deal with the prosecutor to drop all charges against him. Ben was supposed to testify against Sam. The prosecution said that during the time Teresa was missing, Sam suffered scratches on his hands and face. The prosecutor's office believes that these scratches were caused by Teresa in self-defense. Sam's attorney argued that he did not touch Teresa or her car. Teresa may have injured herself and then cleaned up the evidence and threw away an old rug before disappearing. The defense argued that all of the prosecution's evidence was circumstantial. Sam accused Teresa of having an affair. He even investigated her while she was on vacation and discovered that she had booked a double room, even though she was traveling alone. She also used a false name when booking the room. Sam suspected that Teresa had secretly met with his colleague, a police officer who had searched their home 5 times, but his colleague denied the allegations. Ultimately, the choice of the double room could simply have been because it had a large bed for comfort, or perhaps there were no single rooms available at the hotel. Sam still denies any involvement in the crime, arguing that there is no strong evidence to prove his involvement in the case or confirm Teresa's death. The jury was deadlocked and unable to reach a verdict, leading to the decision to retry. On December 3, 2009, 2.5 years after Teresa's disappearance, Sam Parker was convicted of murder, and he was also charged with obstructing and violating the oath of office of a civil servant. Sam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 5 years. Sam continued to maintain that he had nothing to do with Teresa's disappearance. After the trial, he requested a new trial, but his appeal was denied. 3.5 years after Teresa's mysterious disappearance, on September 20, 2010, 2 farmers found a human jawbone in a cornfield near the Chattooga River in Georgia after a flood. A search party later discovered a nearly complete skeleton, and dental records confirmed that it belonged to Teresa. Her death was finally officially recognized. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head from a hole in the skull, not a gunshot wound. The discovery site was 100 kilometers from her home and on the route that Sam had taken to fish. Was confirmed by geolocation data. This led the police to conclude that Sam was responsible for Teresa's murder. Despite this evidence, Sam Parker maintained his innocence. He is currently serving a life sentence in prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Nordal Lalande. On August 26, 2017, in Le Pont de Beauvoisin, Isère, a wedding ceremony was taking place. During the ceremony, no one realized that a stranger had quietly appeared and joined in the joyful atmosphere. He only knew a few people at the ceremony, and he seemed to have his own plans. Among the guests was 8-year-old Maelis Araujo. While everyone was having fun, their mood suddenly changed when Maelis disappeared. This made her family panic. They searched but could not find her. They contacted the police for help. Soon after, the police team arrived and began the search. They searched the entire area and all possible locations she might have gone to. Search dogs and a helicopter from nearby Grenoble were deployed, and additional support was called in. Maelis was not the first child to go missing in the area. Between 2007 and 2017, there were numerous disappearances, many of which went unreported or were closed without any leads. No one knows what happened to these children. It is likely that one or more individuals are the perpetrators. The incident left everyone in France very worried. Parents handed out flyers, and local shopkeepers put up posters of Maelis in their storefronts. The community was aware of previous disappearances in the area, and so were the local gendarmes. However, at first, no one connected Maelis's disappearance to the earlier cases. Despite rumors of a serial killer, the police had yet to apprehend a suspect for a decade. This was because these criminals often operated according to a certain pattern. The missing individuals seemed to vanish without a trace, and most search efforts yielded no results. When Maelis disappeared, people began to wonder if all these cases could be linked. This raised another pressing question. Why had the authorities been unable to find any clues until now? This has caused public outrage. and they have accused the police of ineffectiveness. 5 days after Melis went missing, the police had no leads. Detectives tried to comfort her family, but they knew the chances of finding her alive were very low, given the time that had passed. Then, a man named Ludovic came forward. He was a guest at the wedding and believed he had important information for the investigation. Ludovic was a close friend of 30-year-old Nordal Lelandais. Ludovic explained that he had crashed the wedding. He didn't have an invitation but attended in place of his cousin, who was invited but could not come. His behavior seemed suspicious to the other guests, but they assumed he was just drunk. He eventually agreed to go back to the table, but then vanished. Nordal was so intelligent that even Melis's mother did not realize something was wrong until it was too late. Ludovic thought Nordal should be investigated. Although they had only briefly met, he had gained the trust of many guests. Throughout the evening, he had come across as friendly and approachable. Melis's mother even had a brief chat with him about her family's 3 dogs. He later offered to show Melis his dogs, which made her mother let her guard down. Her mother later admitted that she never thought her child would get into a car with a complete stranger in the middle of the night without telling her parents. There were a lot of people present, so it was puzzling that Melis could disappear without anyone noticing. The kidnapper clearly took steps to hide their actions. One guest recalled seeing Melis exit through the back door alone. Her parents last saw her around 2:30 a.m. When they realized she was missing, they immediately began searching for her. By that time, Nordal had already left, but soon returned. He approached Melis's mother, expressing surprise at the situation. When she asked if he had seen her daughter, he calmly said he had no idea where she was. He offered to help with the search, but then claimed he felt sick from the wine he had consumed. In another case, Eric Frey, 48, moved to Le Pont de Beauvoisin, Isère, with his girlfriend in 2016. They had a serious relationship and big plans for the future. However, shortly after moving in, Eric suddenly disappeared. He walked to a bakery just 15 minutes from their home but never returned. He left his belongings behind and took only a bank card, which suggested he would return soon. His girlfriend and a neighbor searched the area but couldn't reach him by phone. After several hours of searching, his girlfriend went to the police station to report him missing. Unfortunately, the officers were skeptical and advised her to wait 48 hours before filing an official report, reasoning that he was an adult who could have left on his own. Not wanting to wait long, she initiated her own investigation and requested CCTV footage from the bakery. The video showed Eric buying bread and chatting briefly with the cashier. It was clear he disappeared on his way home. She then contacted the police again, but they still found nothing. A year later, in 2017, she came across a news report about another disappearance, Melis's disappearance. She immediately thought that her boyfriend's case and Melis's case might be connected, potentially involve the same perpetrator. Eric's girlfriend believed that the bakery's surveillance cameras could provide a vital clue to the case. The police examined the footage and compared it to the wedding guest list to find any matches. During the investigation, a witness, Erica, provided information suggesting Nordal's possible involvement in the case, and this information was reported in the media. She studied his photo carefully for a while. She then reviewed the videos and noticed a striking resemblance that seemed more than just a coincidence. At the same time, France was facing a serious problem. The number of disappearances was increasing. This rise had made the public worried and angry, as it seemed that criminals were becoming bolder. In Chambéry, about 4 months before Melis's disappearance, the body of 20-year-old Arthur Neuer was found in a river and was determined to have drowned. However, his family disagreed with that conclusion from the inquest. The police discovered that from April 11 to 12, 2017, Arthur had left a local nightclub around 1 a.m. The last person to see him was the nightclub manager, who observed him walking toward the barracks. Since the distance was quite far, Arthur decided to walk along the road, hoping someone would give him a ride. The manager witnessed him flag down a car and get in after asking for a ride. However, he never arrived at his military unit the next morning, leading to his classification as a deserter. Authorities found a trail hundreds of meters from where Arthur got into the car. After reviewing surveillance footage, they uncovered a lead. The car that picked him up had been parked near the nightclub for hours, with the driver apparently waiting for someone. When Arthur appeared on the road, the driver drove off to give him a ride. This raised suspicions, but they could not identify the make or license plate of the car. This was the only lead in the search for Arthur until his body was eventually discovered in the river. His family firmly rejected the idea that he would have deserted the military, as he was passionate about his work and wanted to pursue a military career. Arthur had no prior legal issues. He was generally a friendly person with no history of running away, mental health disorders, or addictions. He also had no conflicts with anyone. Strangely, the police initially took no action. They didn't even examine Arthur's mobile phone until much later, when the search operation began. It was discovered that he had been near a roundabout at 3 a.m., close to a nightclub. Just 4 minutes later, his phone was found 6 kilometers away, and 5 minutes after that, it was located 11 kilometers from the roundabout. Given the time and distance, it was clear that Arthur had been in the kidnapper's car during this period. This information led investigators to identify the mobile phone of the driver. The phone belonged to Nordahl Lelandais, who was driving an Audi A3 at the time. Unfortunately, the nightclub manager, who saw the car stop, couldn't accurately identify its make. The car was searched, but Nordahl denied any involvement in the kidnapping and appeared arrogant. He seemed to feel uncatchable, a trait often found in serial killers. During interrogation, he spoke confidently, demonstrating impressive powers of persuasion. The detectives who worked with him were taken aback. They had difficulty extracting any information from him. Just a few hours after Arthur disappeared, Nordahl visited a car wash, where he spent over 2 hours cleaning the interior and exterior of his car. His behavior raised suspicions. He was supposedly preparing the car for sale, meticulously removing any stains. Surveillance footage from the car wash showed that he focused particularly on the front passenger seat, spending about half an hour on it. Additionally, he took all the napkins and rags he used for cleaning with him, instead of discarding them in the car wash's trash, which also seemed odd. Nordahl insisted that his actions were normal and justified by his preparations for the car sale. Nordahl has 3 large dogs, which cause hair and dirt to accumulate in the interior of his car. He likely realized that the detectives had no solid evidence against him, allowing him to manipulate the situation to his advantage. During questioning, he remained calm, delivering clear and convincing answers, all while accompanied by his lawyer. Despite his suspicions, the police released him due to lack of evidence, and they continued to investigate further. They later discovered that he was actively posting on social media, sharing content that included videos of himself with illegal substances. He openly claimed to be involved in the sale and use of these banned substances on his profiles. As it turns out, Nordahl Lelandais has a criminal record, having been arrested in 2009 for theft and vandalism. However, he was well liked and described by many as a good person. Friends and acquaintances would never have suspected that he could be a serial killer. He was very good at charming people, which probably helped him gain their trust. Sadly, this ability may have contributed to the disappearance of his 13th victim, Lucy Rue. She had been missing for 5 years before Melis disappeared. At 34, she was receiving treatment for phobias at a local psychiatric clinic. She attended therapy during the day and returned home in the evening. One September morning, she left home without any identification or personal belongings and was never seen again. Like other cases, the investigation into Lucy's disappearance found no leads. It seemed she had vanished without a trace. By the end of 2017, Lucy's sister, Natalie, was already aware of Nordahl. She immediately suspected a link between him and Lucy's disappearance after discovering that Lucy had gone missing in roughly the same area where another victim was later found. Unfortunately, just as in previous cases, law enforcement did not take Lucy's case seriously, possibly because of her mental health issues. Years later, investigators finally tracked down a person who was with Lucy at the psychiatric clinic. They discovered that Nordahl was also there for treatment during that time. The two often shared meals in the cafeteria. A witness said he was particularly attentive to her. She was the 13th victim and was described as a beautiful girl who managed to attract his attention. Soon after, she disappeared without a trace. Police began to notice a pattern as they investigated. It became clear that the missing people were related to the neighborhood where Nordahl lived. The attacks occurred within a 25-kilometer radius of his home. Most of the victims were local residents or tourists visiting nearby areas, and many of them knew each other. Nordahl appeared in several cases, including the disappearance of an elderly woman named Georgette, a person who went missing while walking. He even actively participated in the search, volunteering to help find her. However, there was not enough evidence to charge him. Finally, the detectives began to investigate further. One officer spent hours reviewing footage from the car wash and noticed Nordahl's unusual behavior while cleaning his car. He focused on the trunk of the car, spending 47 minutes there, which aroused suspicion. The car was seized again for a detailed examination. To conduct a thorough analysis, all the interior panels were removed, and investigators spent many hours inspecting the vehicle. They eventually discovered blood stains on the wiring in the trunk. DNA testing confirmed the blood was Melis's, raising questions about how it got into the car. The time had come to question Nordahl again and confront him with difficult questions. He was detained once more and brought in for interrogation. From the very beginning, he seemed prepared for the interrogation. He displayed confidence and arrogance, but his demeanor changed when asked about the blood in the trunk. Faced with undeniable evidence, he confessed within a few hours. He admitted that he left the wedding with Melis because he promised to show her his dogs. He claimed the incident was accidental. He said she began to cry for no reason, which frustrated him. In his anger, he struck her hard on the head, resulting in her immediate death. Police then conducted a thorough search and reviewed surveillance camera footage. The investigation focused on recordings from 247 cameras located along the street. They saw video footage of the car carrying Nordahl and Melis. In the footage, she appears frightened, pressing against the locked door, trying to get away from Nordahl. Other recordings show him getting out of the car, seemingly lost in thought, while she is motionless and possibly dead. Nordahl eventually agrees to reveal where he hid Melis's body. However, when they arrived at a remote area near an abandoned factory, he began to act confused and pretended to forget where he had buried her. He led the police in circles for nearly an entire day, and by evening, he still had not disclosed the burial site. Eventually, they found her skull and her clothing. At that moment, he suddenly knelt down and cried loudly. However, his expression seemed insincere. However, the investigation by law enforcement was just beginning. They discovered that Nordahl had left the wedding with Melis at 2:46 a.m. and had put his cell phone on airplane mode to avoid being tracked. He was gone for less than an hour, during which he assaulted her, placed her body in the trunk of his car, and drove to an abandoned factory where he buried her. He then returned to the wedding and, at around 4 a.m., pretended to be drunk to create an alibi without arousing suspicion. Detectives noted a significant issue. He had too little time to accomplish everything he needed to do. This leads them to believe that he actually returned to the wedding with Melis's body still in the trunk. After coming back, He seemed anxious that the police might ask him to open the trunk. The discovery of Mayla's body, however, did not provide many answers. By that time, it had completely decomposed, and only skeletal remains were found. The forensic expert could not determine the exact cause of death, and the injuries she sustained were impossible to evaluate. The forensic expert noted that she had a broken nose and jaw, but these injuries were not severe enough to cause death. There were no signs of weapon wounds on the bones, leading them to believe that Nordahl may have acted out of anger when she screamed, causing him to lose control. In Arthur's case, Nordahl admitted to killing Arthur on March 29. He said that an argument had broken out in the car, which led to a fight, and Arthur fell out of the car. According to Nordahl, the fall was the cause of death, and he considered it an accident. However, investigators had a different opinion. Although there may have been an argument between them, Nordahl deliberately chose Arthur as his victim. That night he was like a predator. He may have used sleeping pills to control Arthur, but there is not enough evidence to suggest he intended to kill beforehand. This led to the maximum sentence being 30 years instead of life. At the trial, on the prosecution side, a woman named Monique, who had actually escaped from Nordahl, testified. She did not want to contact the police to report him because she feared for her safety. However, she ultimately decided to tell her story to help the prosecution put him away for a long time. According to her, at about 10 a.m., one day in July 2014, she arrived at a store where she saw a stranger in the parking lot. He was sitting in a dark Audi A3 and greeted her. She replied that she was not interested in making new acquaintances and entered the store to make her purchases. Monique realized that the man was constantly following her. He trailed her throughout the store but didn't purchase anything, raising her suspicions. When she left the store and went to another one, he followed her again. After leaving the second store, he still chased her by car, but the distance between them grew further and further. When she reached the police station, she asked for their help, believing that their intervention would save her from a dangerous situation. Unfortunately, the police showed little concern and felt powerless to act because there was no clear evidence of a crime. At home, Monique told her son the story, but it was only when she read about Nordahl in the newspaper that she realized it was him. Numerous articles described his aggressive personality, including instances of domestic violence, stalking, and harassment. During the trial, Mayla's parents sought answers about their daughter's fate, ready to hear any truth, and they expected Nordahl to provide a thorough account of the incident. However, he did not provide the truth, as all of his testimony contradicted what had actually happened. Nordahl claimed he was in a panic and experiencing hallucinations, believing that the spirit of Arthur, one of his previous victims, had taken over his body, compelling him to kill Maylis. However, his testimony was dismissed as not credible. The prosecution believes that abuse was the main motive behind Maylis's kidnapping, claiming that he abused and then killed her. Unfortunately, her body was badly decomposed, making it impossible for investigators to confirm these suspicions. On May 11, 2021, Nordahl Lelande was convicted of murdering Arthur Neuer and received a 20-year prison sentence. A year later, he was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Maylis Araujo, resulting in a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Nordahl chose not to appeal his convictions, and authorities are still investigating his potential involvement in other cases. There are several leads, but direct evidence is scarce, and he has not confessed to any additional crimes. During his time in prison, Nordahl took advantage of every opportunity he had. He discovered that prisoners in French prisons retain most rights, except for release, and he began to exploit these privileges. He corresponded with women, charming them as he usually did, and they came to visit him. Using a secret phone, he communicated with teenagers and accessed adult websites. Overall, he created a comfortable life for himself in prison, complete with a refrigerator, TV, and game console. Despite this, Nordahl confided in other inmates about his plan to escape at the end of the year. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Robin Doan. This story takes place on a remote farm in a small town called Pampa in Texas, USA. 10-year-old Robin Doan was the daughter of Michelle Conrad. She lived with Michelle, her stepfather, Brian Conrad, and her older brother, Zach. The family owned a farmhouse in the area, where Brian successfully managed a farming business. The children were raised in a peaceful rural environment. After divorcing the children's biological father, Michelle met Brian, a kind and pleasant man who quickly formed a strong bond with her children. Life improved for Michelle, and she eventually married Brian. The family had been living happily together for several years. By September 2005, Michelle was 6 months pregnant, and the whole family was eagerly anticipating the arrival of the baby. Brian, in particular, was thrilled at the thought of becoming a father. Meanwhile, Robin, a determined and resourceful 10-year-old, was living the typical life of a schoolgirl. She shared close relationships with her mother, brother, stepfather, and even her biological father, who occasionally visited her. Robin also spent some summers with her biological dad. On the evening of September 30, 2005, Robin went to bed as usual, but was suddenly awakened in the middle of the night. At first, she thought she was trapped in a nightmare when she heard her mother screaming and the explosion. It quickly became clear that this was no dream. Something terrible was happening downstairs. Overcome with fear but driven by curiosity, Robin got out of bed and moved to her bedroom door to listen. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, stopping right outside her room. The door creaked open, and Robin quickly leapt back into her bed, her heart racing. She lay perfectly still, trying to suppress her rising fear. Suddenly, the explosion shattered the silence. 2 bullets narrowly missed her, one passing just inches from her left leg and another near the left arm. The third bullet hit a nearby piece of furniture. In the darkness, the attacker didn't realize they had missed her. They then moved to the next room, where Robin's brother, Zach, was asleep. Moments later, more explosions echoed through the house, followed by a faint, heartbreaking cry from Zach. Then, everything fell eerily silent as the attacker left. Robin was frozen with fear, her body paralyzed. She pretended to be dead, using every ounce of willpower to stay perfectly still, too terrified even to breathe deeply, terrified that the attacker might return, notice her alive. In 2.5 hours of panic, she remained in that state, unable to process what had just happened. When she finally managed to summon the courage to move, there were no signs of the intruder. Summoning her strength, Robin cautiously got up. She grabbed her phone and called 911, though every step and movement was filled with dread that the assailant might still be nearby. Her voice trembling, Robin identified herself as a scared 10-year-old girl seeking help. Through tears, she told the operator she was cold and frightened. Between sobs, she explained that she had heard her mother screaming an explosion, but had been too afraid to leave her room to check on her family. She feared the worst, knowing hours had passed without any sound or sign of life from her loved ones. Robin eventually went to the kitchen and gazed out the window, anxiously waiting for the police to arrive. As soon as she saw the flashing lights of the patrol cars, she rushed outside to meet the officers. The little girl, visibly shaken and distressed, was escorted to one of the patrol cars for her safety. Meanwhile, several officers prepared to investigate the house, anticipating the possibility that the attacker might still be inside and ready to confront them. Inside the house, the police discovered a horrifying crime scene. The entire family had been brutally murdered. Brian had been attacked 3 times, Michelle 6 times, and even the family dog had been attacked twice. Robin's brother Zach was killed in his sleep, and one of the bullets struck him directly in the head. Michelle, who was just 2 months away from giving birth, was also tragically killed, and her unborn baby did not survive. Shell casings found at the scene matched a rifle, which was typically purchased through special orders or produced in limited quantities. Throughout this time, Robin remained in the patrol car, waiting for news about her family. She held onto a thin hope that someone had survived. When an officer returned and confirmed that the perpetrator had fled the scene, Robin felt a brief moment of relief. However, the devastating truth about her family's fate was soon revealed to her. Robin began crying again as she fully grasped that her loved ones had been killed. The police informed her that she needed to go to the station to speak with detectives. However, before leaving, Robin asked the officers to help her feed the animals so she could try to calm herself. During this time, she appeared detached from reality. While feeding her goats in the barn, she spoke as though nothing had happened, reminiscing about how she and her brother had won prizes in a competition. But then, she suddenly broke down again, crying as she grabbed one of the officers by the shoulder and desperately asked when her loved ones would come out of the house. The officer had to gently remind her once more that she was the only survivor of the tragedy. Robin was first taken to a nearby medical center for care. The psychologists were assigned to work with her, but this would take time. Doctors examined Robin and confirmed that she was physically unharmed. As a result, the police brought her to the station both to speak with her and to ensure her safety. Meanwhile, detectives understood they were dealing with a dangerous criminal and needed to act quickly to prevent another attack. Robin cooperated with the detectives and provided information to the best of her ability. However, Robin did not witness the events firsthand. Detectives initially suspected that her stepfather or mother might have had a serious conflict with someone shortly before the incident, but this theory was ruled out. Robin denied any such conflicts. Another possibility emerged, that someone in her family might have been involved with dangerous individuals or illegal substances. But Robin dismissed this as well. She couldn't think of anyone who might hate her family enough to attack them with a weapon. Although she described what she heard in great detail, she couldn't identify the attacker. She hadn't gotten a clear look, only catching a glimpse of a dark silhouette. As a result, she was unable to provide any useful description. The only thing she was certain of was that the attacker had light skin. One critical piece of information did stand out. Robin distinctly remembered hearing 15 explosions and confidently reported this number. She later revised her statement slightly, noting that there were clearly more than 10 explosions. When the crime scene was examined, investigators found shell casings confirming that exactly 15 explosions were fired. It seemed surprising that a 10-year-old girl, especially under such terrifying circumstances, could recall this detail so accurately. The situation remained unclear. No motive for the attack had been established, nor had the perpetrator's intentions. It was possible the attacker wanted to eliminate everyone in the household and leave no loose ends. There was even a risk that they might return to target Robin, the sole witness, to complete their plan. For Robin's safety, she will be placed in a specialized center for victims of violence. There, Robin was under the care of her biological father, stepmother, and stepsister, with police officers also stationed at the facility. Now, her father was the only person able to support and help her. He arrived in the middle of the night to pick Robin up, and after her interrogation was completed, they were immediately escorted to the center. Robin was informed that these precautions were necessary for her protection, and she was not allowed to leave the facility. She understood this, as she also herself feared another attack. Despite the restriction on leaving, Robin had to attend her family's funeral. She was allowed to go, but only under police escort. The funeral drew a large crowd from the nearby town, as many people knew the family and spoke about them fondly. In this small agricultural town in Texas, everyone was deeply saddened by the tragedy. For Robin and the mourners, the sight of the three coffins at the memorial was unbearable. No one could have imagined that these kind people could die so tragically. Detectives saw the funeral as an opportunity. The time and location of the service were not kept secret. In fact, the police hoped the attacker might show up. If the perpetrator planned to strike again, the funeral would have been the perfect moment. Law enforcement was fully prepared to act, closely monitoring the crowd while keeping a watchful eye on Robin, who was accompanied by her father, stepmother, and stepsister. But the event passed without any suspicious activity. By this point, forensic experts had finished examining the crime scene. They uncovered evidence that might assist in identifying the perpetrator, but no solid leads pointed directly to the murderer. Still, the findings were notable. Inside the house, they found shoe prints, and outside, near the house, they discovered tire tracks. The experts collected all the prints and carefully analyzed the tire tread patterns. Unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA belonging to the attacker were recovered. The lack of fingerprints led investigators to believe the attacker had worn gloves. The only blood found at the scene was that of the victims, suggesting the perpetrator was uninjured. It seemed the family was caught off guard and had no opportunity to resist or fight back. The back door of the house had been forced open, indicating a break-in. However, despite the presence of valuable items, including a wallet with cash, nothing was stolen from the home. Detectives determined that robbery was not the motive behind the attack. The assailant's behavior didn't match that of someone acting impulsively or under the influence of banned substances or alcohol. Instead, the killer acted with intention and precision, methodically eliminating the family members one by one. The police thoroughly investigated of Brian, Michelle, and Zach, but found no suspicions. No one had a motive, and everyone appeared to be kind, peaceful, and conflict-averse. Robin's biological father had been with his family in a nearby town, and his wife confirmed he was home asleep that night. Eventually, all leads came to a standstill, as no one in the family's circle seemed to fit the profile of a suspect. However, such a violent act targeting both adults and children suggested the possibility of a strong motive, such as jealousy, revenge, or resentment. The day before Robin's family was murdered, in the small town of Pineville, Missouri, relatives of the McCool family have attempted to contact them without success. By evening, worried relatives had arrived at the McCool family home. To their shock, the house was empty and surrounded by police tape. A neighbor informed them that a terrible crime had occurred. The night before, Orly McCool and Dawn McCool were killed by an unidentified attacker. At that time, forensic investigators were still processing the scene. They also questioned the relatives who arrived, but no one could provide any helpful information about a possible suspect. Inside the house, investigators found some unusual shell casings of an uncommon caliber, rare and difficult to obtain in the U.S. The following day, another incident in the same area provided a key lead. A local resident, Mr. King, returned to his home after being away for several days on a work trip. He discovered that his house had been broken into, his weapon safes had been forced open and emptied. Among the stolen items was a rare firearm in the U.S. along with ammunition. This strongly suggested a connection between the burglary and the murder of the McCool family. The assailant had likely stolen the weapon from King before committing the crime. Mr. King was thoroughly investigated, but he had a solid alibi. He was out of town at the time of the attack. However, several members of his family could have had access to the weapon. Among them, one person stood out: Levi King, the son of King. Levi was on the run, and family members suspected he was connected to the McCool murders. Thanks to Mr. King's report, detectives had a photo of the suspected killer. At just 20 years old, Levi was already well known to authorities due to his criminal history, which included serving time for burglary. A few years earlier, Levi had broken into a neighbor's house, stolen valuables, and set the property on fire. For this crime, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Just weeks earlier, Levi had been scheduled for transfer to another correctional facility. Desperate for freedom, he escaped during the transfer. Authorities in Missouri were certain Levi was extremely dangerous, armed, and ready to use his weapons at any time. Citizens were alerted through the media, and people were advised not to approach Levi if they encountered him, but to immediately contact law enforcement. Meanwhile, relatives of the McCool family reported several items stolen, including their Dodge Dakota pickup truck. The truck's details were entered into a police database, and a warrant was issued for Levi King's arrest in connection with the crime at the McCool residence. Although Levi King did not know any of the victims personally, he was on the run and needed resources, particularly a vehicle, to leave the state. Eventually, a suspicious young man was stopped by Border Patrol in El Paso, Texas, near the Mexican border, likely attempting to flee the country. During the stop, the young man calmly admitted to having a weapon in his trunk. This led to a more detailed search. During the investigation, they discovered that the pickup truck he was driving was the McCool family's stolen vehicle. Levi was taken to the police station for further investigation. Law enforcement officers decided to question Levi further, and from the start, his behavior seemed odd. Within just 15 minutes of talking to detectives, Levi confessed to the double murder of Orly and Dawn McCool. Levi admitted he couldn't explain why he committed the murders. He said he broke into a random house on the outskirts of town to steal a car, driven only by an overwhelming and uncontrollable desire to kill. When Levi entered the house, he was unexpectedly noticed. A door opened, and a woman appeared, politely asking what he wanted. Levi claimed he was startled and panicked, so he grabbed his weapon and attacked her. Hearing the noise, a man came to investigate, and Levi, paralyzed by fear, also attacked him. After the killings, Levi fled in the pickup truck. Levi was soon extradited to Missouri, where local law enforcement questioned him further. During the interrogation, Levi once again confessed to the murders. Levi made an even more shocking confession. He admitted to murdering the Robin family in Texas. His confession matched evidence from the crime scene of the Robin family's triple murder, including matching shell casings found at both crime scenes. Levi described how he had attacked defenseless members of the Robin family, and upon hearing noises upstairs, discovered others in the house. Among them was Robin, who awoke to the explosion. Driven by uncontrollable bloodlust, the killer showed no regard for the victims' ages. Levi went upstairs, entered the bedrooms, and attacked the occupants in their beds to eliminate any witnesses. After committing these horrific acts, Levi fled the scene. After Levi confessed to the crimes, the police quickly contacted their colleagues in Texas to verify the details he had provided. Once again, his account aligned with the evidence. With this confirmation, Robin was finally able to feel some relief. She had been under immense stress for days, unable to sleep. The next day, investigators from Texas arrived to take Levi into custody. During the transfer, showing no remorse, Levi openly described his emotional state before, during, and after the murders. He admitted that the feelings he experienced during the murders were more intense and pleasurable than any banned substance. Even hours after committing the killings, he claimed he could still smell gunpowder, which gave him a sense of euphoria. In a formal video-recorded statement, he detailed his actions, starting with the murder of the McCool family. Levi explained that his urge to kill coincided with his need for a vehicle to escape toward the Mexican border. Along the way, he felt another uncontrollable desire to kill and randomly chose the isolated home of the Robin family as his next target. Levi admitted that he did not know any of his victims, including the McCools or the Robins. Realizing the severity of his crimes, He understood he was now facing the death penalty. In an attempt to avoid this, he fled toward Mexico, hoping to disappear. In Missouri, Levi was charged with the double murder of the McCool family. Following his lawyer's advice, he accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. At the same time, hearings for the triple murder and attempted murder in Texas were approaching. Unlike in Missouri, Texas prosecutors took a firmer stance, refusing to rule out the death penalty or consider any plea agreements from the defense. The prosecutor was confident in securing a conviction that would ensure Levi could no longer pose a threat to society. However, death penalty cases often involve lengthy trials and require extensive preparation. Levi spent several years in jail without bail while awaiting trial in Texas. By the time the trial began, Robin, the sole survivor of the Texas attack, was over 14 years old. The hearings took place just before her birthday. On the eve of her 15th birthday, Robin was furious as she realized how senseless and brutal Levi's attack on her family had been. He had no motive and acted purely out of a desire to kill. Understandably, she strongly advocated for him to receive the death penalty. However, Levi's lawyer fought to save his client from execution. Opinions were divided. Some believed Levi did not deserve to live, while others argued that life imprisonment without parole was a harsher and more fitting punishment for his crimes. The defense attorney sought to present Levi King as a more sympathetic figure to influence the jury's decision. He emphasized that Levi had struggled with bipolar disorder since adolescence. Over the years, he had also been diagnosed with depression, psychosis, and schizophrenia. Levi was one of 7 children in a family where he reportedly received little to no love or care. His antisocial behavior was linked to an abusive, alcoholic father and a neglectful, indifferent mother. From as early as elementary school, Levi engaged in troubling acts, including arson, substance abuse, and killing animals for amusement. These behaviors seemed to reflect the dysfunctional environment he grew up in. Levi's abusive father was the first to frequently harm him and expose him to alcohol and banned substances. When police visited Levi's home, they were shocked by what they found. One wall was covered with ceremonial knives, swords, and weapons. Strangely, despite often struggling to afford food, Levi always managed to buy ammunition and weapons. Levi's obsession with violence contradicted the defense's claim that he was a good person, shaped by an adverse childhood and environment. The prosecution painted a different picture, portraying Levi King as a predator waiting for his chance to strike. They described him as someone who took pleasure in the smell of blood and gunpowder. The prosecution's main witness was Robin, the sole survivor of Levi's attack. The trial was a deeply traumatic experience for her. She was determined to confront the man who had destroyed her family. Up until that moment, she had been filled with anger and wished for his death. Later, Robin shared her story with journalists. She explained that when she first looked into Levi's eyes in court, she was struck by how empty and cold he seemed. As she saw his lifeless eyes, she forgave him. Robin realized it was pointless to waste energy on someone so devoid of humanity. She understood that Levi could not have become any other kind of person. After about 8 hours of deliberation, the jury decided that the death penalty was too harsh for someone as mentally handicapped as he was. They sentenced Levi to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Levi was eventually extradited to Missouri to serve his life sentence there. For a long time after the attack on her family, Robin struggled with severe psychological trauma. She frequently had nightmares, couldn't sleep well, and was unable to go outside alone. Even years later, the effects of her trauma would resurface. However, thanks to the support of her loved ones, she was able to overcome them. The case of Robin Doan raises many questions about the influence of psychology and deviant behavior. Gaming addiction and the use of high doses of antidepressants may be closely related to a number of factors that cause the psychology of people facing stress or psychological disorders to become unstable, leading to violent behavior. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ursula and Sabina Eriksson. The story begins on the morning of May 17, 2008. Inspectors from the Birmingham Road Service, monitoring video footage from road cameras in London, spotted two women walking on the median strip of the busy M6 motorway. The police were called to deal with the unusual situation, and a film crew from a morning news program also attended the scene. They thought the women might be eccentric, drunk, or under the influence of drugs. As the patrol car carrying police and journalists arrived at the scene, a radio message reported that one of the women had left the median strip and walked into the road, where she was hit by a car. At the time, no one knew how serious her injuries were, but those present began to realize that the story was becoming increasingly complicated. When the reporters arrived, they saw other patrol officers who had arrived a little earlier, talking to the strange women on the side of the road. Neither of the women appeared to be injured. Only later did it become clear that one of the women had actually been hit by a car on the road. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries. The twins looked quite normal. They were not shaking or screaming, and they were listening and occasionally looking around. The reporters began filming the police explaining the incident on camera, when suddenly something happened that even eyewitnesses could hardly believe. One of the sisters, Ursula, suddenly threw her bag onto the asphalt and ran into the street just as a large truck had passed. The patrol officer tried to stop her by grabbing her coat sleeve, but his efforts were in vain. In a state of obvious distress, she ran forward and took off her coat, which the police were holding. The truck was approaching, and she ducked down and crawled under its wheels. Although the truck driver reacted quickly, he could not stop in time. The truck rolled over Ursula's leg, breaking it. She screamed, then fell silent and lay motionless on the road. Overwhelmed by the scene, all the passers-by rushed to her aid. At that moment, Sabina Eriksson, who was standing on the side of the road, seized the opportunity when the police were distracted. She rushed into the road after her sister and was hit head-on by a Volkswagen, which threw her a considerable distance. It was hard to comprehend this surreal situation. The two women looked so much alike and seemed to be facing death at such a young age, lying on the road just 3 meters apart. Despite their serious injuries, both were still alive. Ursula had a broken pelvis and both legs. Sabina and Ursula said nothing, only groaning softly in pain. When they regained their composure, they both tried to stand up despite their injuries, ignoring everyone's pleas for them to stay still until the ambulance arrived. At this point, they began to swear. The sisters then fought back against the patrol officers as if police were their worst enemies. Traffic on the freeway was stopped, and an ambulance helicopter was called to pick up the injured. Witnesses believed that Ursula and Sabina were under the influence of heavy drugs, which seemed to be the only explanation for their strange behavior. Both appeared to feel no pain and were very aggressive towards the police. The sisters appeared confused about their surroundings and what had happened. Sabina suddenly stood up. Despite having been hit by a car, she appeared unharmed. Instead, she exhibited a strong urge to escape. She seemed completely oblivious to her injuries, demonstrating incredible stamina as she tried to move away. A policewoman tried to calm Sabina by holding her hand, but Sabina responded by turning around and pushing the officer away. Sabina then attempted to evade the police's grasp. After taking off her coat, she assumed a fighting stance, ready for confrontation. At this point, the police had to step in to assist. A driver who was watching the scene saw Sabina being restrained and forced into the police car. During the struggle, she screamed angrily and fought back violently, as if she were fighting for her life. Ursula repeatedly called the police, insisting, "Police, I recognize you. You are not real police officers." Although some police officers showed her their badges, Ursula remained aggressive and tried to fight the ambulance staff. She bit their hands and attempted to resist. After being injected with a strong sedative, she calmed down, allowing them to take her to the helicopter. At this point, everyone concluded that Ursula and Sabina Eriksson had used a hallucinogen. Both women were airlifted to the nearest hospital. Ursula underwent surgery to remove her ruptured spleen and suffered multiple fractures to her spine, pelvis, and both legs. Doctors, on the other hand, found no serious injuries on Sabina. By this time, about 5 hours had passed since the accident. Sabina had calmed down considerably and appeared happier, with no signs of aggression as before. She answered some questions but remained silent on others and made no attempt to fight back or escape. Overall, she behaved normally and appropriately. The officers who came to arrest her were surprised by what they encountered. Sabina's demeanor was now completely different. Before them stood a gentle, quiet blonde woman in a hospital gown, who followed them to the police car without resistance. After placing her in the back seat, they chose not to handcuff Sabina. When she arrived at the station, she chatted about the weather, laughed, joked, and even flirted with the officers. She allowed them to search her without protest. This behavior seemed unbelievable because just hours earlier, she had appeared ready to unleash her fury on anyone who came near her. Because her communication style had changed so dramatically, the officers did not attempt to calm her down and began to treat her normally. The police tried to talk to Sabina to find out more details, but strangely, she seemed to have forgotten everything that had happened. She showed no interest in younger sister Ursula and did not ask about her. Instead, Sabina frequently looked at her reflection, was preoccupied with her appearance, and searched for her clothes and jewelry. When asked about her behavior, she would either remain silent or tell the police that she did not remember. Sabina insisted that she had never intended to harm herself or anyone else. Ultimately, the interrogation yielded no results. Later, tests confirmed that neither Ursula nor Sabina Eriksson had any traces of drugs or alcohol in their systems. There was nothing suspicious about Sabina's home, and the police found no evidence that either sister had ever used or purchased hard drugs. Sabina faced charges of assaulting a police officer and causing a public nuisance, while Ursula appeared to have avoided any legal consequences. However, the police were surprised by a call from Sabina's husband, who had no idea where his wife was or what had happened. The police who took up the sisters' case were left stunned by the twins' unpredictable behavior. After speaking to Sabina on the day of the incident, police and psychiatrists concluded that, despite her previous condition on the M6, she was now mentally stable. She was aware of her surroundings, understood who was with her, and accurately assessed herself, the time, and her environment. Most importantly, she was stable and posed no danger to herself or others. Incredibly, her previous bouts of insanity on the highway were temporary, and there was no longer any reason to diagnose or commit Sabina to a psychiatric facility. Sabina was detained before her trial. On 19 May 2008, her trial took place. Sabina Eriksson was found sane and admitted to assaulting a police officer and causing a dangerous situation on the road. The court fined her and sentenced her to 1 day in jail, which she served in pre-trial detention. Sabina and Ursula were then released, although just days earlier, Sabina had deliberately thrown herself in front of a car and violently attacked a police officer. No one could explain her sudden bout of insanity, but everyone believed that it had been completely normal. This meant that she was free to go wherever she wanted. During this time, police began to piece together the events leading up to the M6 motorway incident. The twin sisters, Sabina and Ursula, were born on 3 November 1967 in the Swedish city of Sunne. They were not the only children, They had an older sister and an older brother. Ursula and Sabina, along with their relatives, remained in contact with each other. However, Ursula and Sabina Eriksson had not seen each other for 8 years until the day before the traffic accident on 16 May 2008. On that day, Ursula flew from the United States to visit Sabina, who lived in Mallow, County Cork, Ireland, with her husband and 2 children. Ursula then stayed at her house. The next day, at 2 a.m., the sisters secretly boarded a ferry to Liverpool, England, with their own motives. Upon arrival, they deliberately went to the police station. In subsequent interviews, the sisters did not explain why they had left Ireland for England. According to police reports, at around 8:30 a.m. on 16 May 2008, they went to Liverpool police station and claimed that Sabina's children, who lived in Mallow, were in danger. The sisters' story was so chaotic and disorganized that the police could not understand it at first. After hearing their agitated account, the officers became suspicious and attempted to verify their claims. They contacted the Dublin police, who were responsible for maintaining order in Mallow. They discovered that the previous night, neighbors had called the police to Sabina Eriksson's home due to loud shouting and arguments within the family. It was revealed that the couple had not only argued, but had also been seriously fighting. The police tried to calm Sabina Eriksson and her husband by warning them about the potential consequences of their argument. The tension seemed to ease, and the officers decided to leave. However, no one knew what happened next in the house. After discussing the situation with colleagues in Dublin, the Liverpool police realized they were dealing with a distressed woman facing marital problems. Due to the expense and complexity of intervening in personal matters, the police advised Sabina to calm down and return to her children. Despite this advice, Ursula and Sabina Eriksson did not return to their home in Mallow. Instead, at 11:30, they unexpectedly boarded a National Express bus to London. Both sisters were carrying large bags that were difficult to manage. The bus driver informed all passengers that such bags should be stored in the luggage compartment, but the sisters anxiously held on to their bags, refusing to put them away. The driver grew increasingly anxious and began observing them in his rearview mirror. He noticed Ursula and Sabina Eriksson's tense demeanor. They kept looking around and seemed to be planning something. Most notably, they clutched their bags tightly, as if they were their only hope of survival. After safely arriving at the nearest intercity bus station, the driver dropped Ursula and Sabina Eriksson off and reported the incident to the station manager. The manager, following protocol, immediately contacted the police, informing them that there were 2 women at her station who might have bombs in their bags. When the police arrived and searched the sisters, they found nothing suspicious and considered the call a false alarm. Perhaps if the police had paid more attention to Ursula and Sabina Eriksson's mental state, they might have been able to prevent a series of tragic events. However, their main goal was to prevent a potential terrorist attack, not to assess the women's behavior. So the sisters were allowed to leave. For some reason, they were determined to get to London, but they were short on money. It is unclear what they were thinking, but it seems that the only option they considered to reach the British capital was to walk along the median strip of the M6 motorway. They were discovered by a road inspector at 15:20 that day. The story is not over yet. There is still much to explore. Let's take another look at Sabina. After her release, psychiatrists, police, and judges assessed her and determined that she was no longer a danger to society. When she left court, she was instructed to return home to her husband and children. However, instead of going home, she began wandering around the city, lost in thought. Interestingly, she was wearing her sister's green cardigan, which Ursula had discarded before she was hit by the truck. With the belongings the police had given her in a bag, she wandered into the park where she met 2 local men, Glenn Hollinshead and his friend Peter. They had just enjoyed a few beers at a nearby bar. Feeling lonely and missing her twin younger sister Ursula, she felt the need to talk to someone. She approached Glenn Hollinshead's dog, stroked its fur and talked to it. She then turned to the men nearby and began to share her story. She told them that her twin sister had been in a serious car accident and was currently in the hospital. Sabina said that she was alone and without any support. Now she really wanted to find and visit younger sister Ursula. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Glenn Hollinshead and Peter, moved by her story, expressed their desire to help her. Glenn, a former military doctor known for his kindness and openness, invited Sabina to stay with him for a few days. He promised to help her find her twin sister. Unfortunately, this decision sealed Glenn's fate. The next day, Sabina, whom he had helped, attacked Glenn and tragically killed him in his own home. Around 8 p.m., Glenn's friends came to his house. At first, they chatted normally and drank a few beers together. However, Sabina appeared distressed and anxious, focused on thoughts of Ursula. She was sitting on a chair when she suddenly stood up, looking out into the dark night. Then she hurriedly pulled the curtain shut, seemingly frightened but unable to explain her strange behavior. Over time, Sabina's actions began to seem paranoid. She refused food and drink. Later, Sabina offered cigarettes to Glenn and his friends, but then abruptly snatched them away, insisting that the cigarettes might be poisoned. Just before midnight, Peter decided to leave. What happened between Glenn and Sabina afterwards is known only to Sabina. Around noon the next day, Glenn contacted his brother, who worked at the University Hospital of North Staffordshire. Glenn asked his brother to help him find Ursula Eriksson, Sabina's sister. Glenn recounts Sabina's story to his brother, but they realize that finding Ursula is a big challenge. After that, there was a gap in the story, and no one knew what happened. At 7:40 p.m. on May 20, while dinner was being prepared, Glenn left the house to ask a neighbor, Frank Booth, for tea bags, then went back inside. A minute later, he staggered outside bleeding and told Frank Booth that Sabina had stabbed him. Glenn then quickly collapsed and died from his injuries. Before he died, Glenn asked Frank Booth to look after his dog. Frank Booth quickly called the police to report the situation. According to the police report, an ambulance arrived at approximately 8 p.m. On the way to Glenn's home, paramedics found a woman standing in the street, holding a hammer and occasionally hitting herself in the head with it. The woman was later identified as Sabina Eriksson. Minutes earlier, she had attacked Glenn, causing his death. Several paramedics rushed to check on him, while 2 other paramedics rushed to assist Sabina. At that time, a motorist named Joshua Gradage attempted to wrest the hammer from her hand. While struggling with him, Sabina screamed, took a brick out of her pocket, and hit him in the back of the head, causing him to become dizzy and fall. Paramedics witnessed this strange and frightening development. They quickly understood that they were dealing with a very dangerous person who needed to be restrained and controlled. Although pursuing aggressive individuals was not usually part of their duties, the ambulance crew pursued Sabina in an attempt to subdue her. She moved at incredible speed, evading them and running down the highway. The chase lasted several minutes, and it was soon discovered that she was heading toward a 12-meter-high bridge. With a single leap, she reached the railing of the bridge and without hesitation, jumped, ending one of the strangest and most confusing street chases in British history. Sabina Eriksson survived her ordeal. Surprisingly, most people who jump from a bridge die. However, Sabina only suffered 2 broken ankles and a head injury. When she arrived at the hospital, she appeared completely normal, showing no signs of aggression, delirium, or paranoia. It is unclear whether she truly remembered nothing or was just hiding her past. Either way, she remained silent. On June 6, 2008, she appeared in court for her first trial, sitting in a wheelchair. The prosecution presented a long list of charges against her, but provided no details about her motives. Sabina's lawyer was equally confused, unable to explain her actions. As a result, Both sides quickly reached a settlement, although psychiatrists declared her sane at the time of the murder. Neither Ursula nor Sabina Eriksson had a clear motive. How can we explain their actions in just a few days? The lead psychiatrist at the trial told the prosecution that Sabina Eriksson was suffering from a delusional disorder caused by excitement at the time of the murder, which may have occurred during a mass psychosis. He confirmed that she is now fully sane during the hearings. Psychiatrists have stated that Sabina suffered from acute polymorphic psychosis during her moments of madness, which was also caused by mass psychosis. In the fall of 2009, a British court convicted Sabina Eriksson of several crimes, including the manslaughter of Glenn Hollinshead. Although she admitted her guilt, she claimed that she had no memory of the events, had no malicious intent, and did all this in a state of clouded mind. The judge considered Sabina Eriksson's case to be the most difficult he had ever faced. He believed that her guilt in the case was minimal because she was not aware of her actions at the time. He acknowledged that Glenn Hollinshead's family might not be happy with his verdict. However, he based his decision on the understanding that the murder was caused by temporary mental incapacity and that Sabina's level of guilt was low. Therefore, this verdict was not intended to punish Sabina. The actions of the twin sisters, Sabina and Ursula Eriksson, were attributed to a phenomenon known as collective schizophrenia, which has different names in many languages. As a result, Sabina Eriksson was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Both Ursula and Sabina were affected by their own insanity. This mental state caused Sabina to hear imaginary voices that led her to act strangely. She held false beliefs that she thought were true. In September 2009, Sabina was sent to a regular women's prison. During her time there, she experienced a brief period of erratic behavior, but afterward, she seemed to have no memory of it. Sabina served 2.5 years of her 5-year sentence. She was released early due to an amnesty. Younger sister Ursula returned to live and work in the United States. After completing her sentence, Sabina returned to live with her husband and children in Ireland. Sabina never revealed why she and younger sister Ursula were in England, what happened that day on the M6, or what happened to Glenn Hollinshead. Some believe that the criminal justice system failed in the case of Ursula and Sabina Eriksson because it did not answer many questions or hold those responsible accountable. Glenn's brother has expressed his disappointment that Sabina Eriksson was allowed to go free after committing a serious crime. He believes that Sabina's mental condition should be recognized and treated by professionals. However, psychiatrists seem to dismiss his concerns, stating that there is no reliable diagnostic system for identifying such conditions based on observation alone. Interestingly, the twins' brother disagrees with the court's decision, although his reasons differ from those of Glenn's brother. The twins' brother believes that Ursula and Sabina were not temporarily insane in May 2008. Instead, he argues that they were fleeing a real threat, a man who was chasing and threatening them.